there will be no real non-controlled currency in the world.
We're coming for you, banks.
Increasing the block size to 32 megabytes right now. What would be the top 5 arguments that would get hurled against me?
Oh, that's a good one.
There are a few that the big blockers got right.
Ching, like all these coins splash into the wallets of all the winners. I love that.
There's a new threat out there. It's crypto.
All right. Hello and welcome back to the Bitcoin Cash podcast. Following Bitcoin Cash on its rise to global reserve currency, this is episode number 110, Chaumian eCash and COPA Verdict, featuring returning guest Moonsettler. Today is Saturday, the 16th of March, 2024. I'm your host, Jeremy. Jet is doing the producing, same as always, and Moonsettler has come back on the show to address a topic that we meant to touch on initially, but we didn't quite get around to the first time. And so we're back for round 2. But how you been in the last couple of months, mate? What are you feeling on the Bitcoin scene these days?
Hello guys, it's nice to be back. I'm generally like rather pessimistic. Of course, it's nice when price goes up, but we are seeing a giant cultural shift towards conservatism and basically a huge push towards ossification in the Bitcoin scene. And I'm not overly happy with that. Of course, it was always possible that we go down this path, but I expect it like much later, decades later, perhaps. So yeah.
What do you think's driving that? Do you think the price increases are making people feel like it's working and therefore we need to be more conservative? Or is this just the extension of an ongoing trend, or is there some other factor?
Yeah, I personally think it's a combination of a whole bunch of people coming into Bitcoin. A lot of early evangelists have focused on bringing as many people into Bitcoin as possible, as fast as possible, and basically the original cypherpunk stock got diluted to the point where it is barely perceivable sometimes, and that means a lot of people are coming from a fiat speculatory angle, and they are creating these weird narratives. I'm pretty sure you are all familiar with how it went down gradually, but it has come to a point where discussing Bitcoin development stuff is perceived as an attack on Bitcoin by a pretty loud and obnoxious part of the Bitcoin community, and that is the situation currently, that we are once again hitting the scaling limitations and discussion around how to find a way forward that is not just basically the reinvention of banking, free banking or fractional reserve banking or fictional reserve banking, however you want to call it. And basically just recreating the entire, shit show that has resulted in the contemporary banking system and how the state is basically taking control of people's finances. If you don't want that, if you want something else and you want to discuss that, then certain people like really react to that in a hostile manner, and they will, tell you to fork off basically.
Yes, exactly. I mean, I have been losing visibility over what's exactly going on in the BTC community a little bit, because it's now at the point where a significant chunk of the BTC side have kind of blocked me or muted me or don't want to talk to me or any of those things. So I see the BTC community through the parts of it that are willing to at least talk to me or remain somewhat open. But I know there is, on the other side of that, there is the really like stick in the mud, like cannot be negotiated or discussed with reasonably at all in any sense kind of wonderland going on.
Yeah, this laser eye phenomenon, I'm pretty sure you have seen it, that people are adopting this laser eye and are actually relishing in adopting a psychopathic person online and just celebrating this toxic maximalist thing. You know, there was a funny exchange, I think yesterday, where some journalists asked told about the Bitcoin's origin story and how they should, and someone recommended to interview Adam Beck, and she said, no, we can't have anyone with the IT. I laughed so hard when I read that I almost fell off my seat.
Yeah, well, it's funny to see how things like for someone like her from the outside, she doesn't know anything about anything. All she knows is that I'm not going to get very far if like I'm already seeing these laser eyes. Yeah. And then, yeah, she got absolutely ratioed because Adam Back replied and said, we can talk at 100K. And then everyone was like, haha, lel, number go up. And then, she'll be wrecked and she'll come crawling back, which is the standard approach and probably accurate. Probably, that might happen. BTC might hit 100K and she might have to bend her policy. But that will, I guess, be up to her.
But to be honest, I kind of understand. Like, if you actually want to have a decent discussion about stuff, then the laser eye people are not going to be your best attempt at it. And that includes Adam Beck, by the way. Like, if you actually want to have a decent discussion about Bitcoin, I wouldn't pick Adam Beck. I know this is a very minority opinion in the Bitcoin scene, but yeah.
Yeah. So for anyone who doesn't know, you were on episode 104. So if they're interested in all your backstory and all CTV and everything, we already talked about that on 104. So you can go back and listen to that. But for today, we just need to crack on, starting with the price. I've put an uneuphoric fail on BTC all-time highs. So it's not now, the price has dipped off, but we have seen BTC hit fresh all-time highs just in the last few days over at $73,000-ish. Now, that didn't correlate to high on-chain fees, and it didn't create a euphoria or a media panic or a mass inflow into crypto, which is new. That's, as far as I know, the first time that's ever happened. I think a lot of people are still sitting and expecting like, okay, maybe we'll creep up to 100K and that will set off a euphoria. But there's a part of me that also wonders if, I've said several times, I think the whole super cycle, and I think that's all a bit bullshit, and maybe we won't actually hit on that. So just quickly to touch on the price, USD $401.35 will buy you 100 megasats of BCH, slightly down. One BTC sat buys 169.5 BCH sats, which is down, and one Ethereum buys 917 megasats, also down slightly. The April 4 halving is in 19 days and Bliss is in 59 days. But coming back to the price all-time highs, do you think this is a change in the cyclical behavior? Are you surprised to see a lack of retail euphoria or even media panic? Like, there was some coverage, but not much, right?
Yeah, I honestly don't know. The thing that I absolutely love when we made these new all-time highs nominally, because of course inflation adjusted, we are not where we were in 2021. Like, that would be more like the 80K region or above. I don't know. Inflation is sort of subjective. People have different baskets and different circumstances, but the CPI corrected, it would be something like 78, 80K or something, I think. And so we are not there. We did not actually, as far as I'm concerned, made an all-time high. But it's always nice when you are at least not like fully wrecked. I appreciate that. I'm not gonna lie. But this whole thing about Bitcoin not actually keeping up with real inflation, that was a surprise to me. I mean, some people might actually laugh about that. How did you not see that Bitcoin only reacts to the liquidity pumped into the financial system and not at all to actual price increases, right? It did surprise me. I did not expect this bear market to suck so much, but we are probably over it. And I think this time it's more like the halving, because previously the halving like shifted the supply and demand for Bitcoin slightly, like it decreased the liquid available supply created each day, and this time the ETFs kind of did the other thing. They opened up a new market and a new pretty consistent demand. It's like marching ants type of thing, you know. And of course on the weekends the shop is closed, but with Monday it usually like it gets a decent pump and it goes on. Of course you have no idea how long this will go on and to what degree, but so long that this extra demand comes from for Bitcoin, it probably is going to continue creeping up slowly. And we are definitely not in a mania phase, and that would be weird pre-halving historically. But I think it's kind of like a similar thing. Like we are not in the hype mania phase whatsoever. We are early on that, and it's just a structural change in supply versus demand, and that's what you are seeing. So yeah, it might be, as people say, a left translated cycle. Like it might actually be like the previous cycles, only a little bit translated to the left. And of course, the extra demand that ETFs are now creating is actually larger than the supply reduction that the halving will produce. So it might actually even be more pronounced, and it might actually make the halving, in a sense, like a complete nothing burger. We will see, I guess.
Yeah. We haven't actually taken a stab on this show, I don't believe, but maybe we should, just for shits and giggles, as to what do you think BTC all-time high price this cycle. Jet, do you have actually any thoughts on this if you were going to guess? No.
I think I would just like sound like an idiot to make a prediction, like, because I feel like I assumed that we would have hit 70,000 a while ago, to be honest. So yeah, okay. I don't know.
Well, I just feel like maybe we should at least have a wild stab, you know? There's going to be no ramifications. Nobody needs to take it seriously. But like, I mean, I just honestly, even to me, 150 still feels like really high. But who knows once it gets rolling with the ETFs.
Yeah,
maybe.
I think if we go into the halving with around these prices, let's say, like around 70K, 69K, seems to be what we are converging around. Go into the halving, maybe we get a little dip after the halving, and then, you know, it starts creeping up, and then suddenly the mania phase hits, maybe above 100K, people really start to ape in. I don't know if that happens, but previous cycles suggest that something like that might happen. If we get a proper blow of top, because last cycle top was not a blow of top, many claim that the FTX shenanigans actually like suppressed the price massively and created a lot of altcoins also moved. So it was a distribution top. Some people say, not really an expert on these things. I just hear things and they make sense. It was a different thing. But if we get a real hype mania blow of top, then it can be in the several hundreds of thousands of dollars easily. Like that's just if you look at the chart proportionally, that can happen. But it can also happen that we go into some serious depression macroeconomics wise, and risk assets like get dropped like hot potato, right? And that would be funny if the all-time high came before the halving. And after that, like we get just a purgatory the whole this side. Like that's in the cards, I think. But probably we are going to see several hundreds of thousands of dollars somewhere. I think if it all goes well, if the Fed is easing on this. There's some monetary easing or liquidity pumping into the system, then absolutely. Sadly, pretty much the situation where Bitcoin is responding to that most readily. How much liquidity is pumped into the system, it tries to front run any inflation, and when the actual inflation comes, then it just success. So that's kind of like how this game is going, and I'm not sure if anything is changed fundamentally. No.
Yeah, Naval made an interesting tweet where he said the narrative for this cycle is that this is the last cycle, and so he's at least getting on board the hype train of like, well, maybe it starts to run and it just keeps going while the USD hyperinflates to nothing. I don't see that this cycle. Maybe by next cycle, but I don't think we're quite ready there. We've cracked into the big money in the institutional markets, but BTC still has scaling problems, and you still have most of the world a bit, iffy on crypto, right? Like maybe we're at 10 or 15% sort of mental adoption where people are kind of like, yeah, I'm about there. But you really need to get over that, 40% probably to where you hit a critical mass, I'd say.
I don't know what the consequences will be. That pretty much all mass adoption on Bitcoin right now looks to be some custodial relationship based thing. And Bitcoin looks to be posed for like a financialization. It becomes something regulated and traded like a stock for almost everyone. And when you do that, you basically completely detach from layer one and its properties. Like you abandon all of its properties. You abandon its permissionless nature, its trustless nature. You even abandon the supply, really, because the numbers people see on their screens, the things that get sold to them, increasingly can detach from anything that is happening on chain. And that can actually mean that it was the last cycle because it becomes a completely manipulated thing where derivatives upon derivatives are sold to people, and there will be hundreds of millions of Bitcoins sold to people that never existed on chain, but the system will just be too large for anyone to try to do a bank run or anything, or even not even going to be allowed. So it's certainly possible that these walled gardens will actually be closed down and it will not be allowed to withdraw. Everything in the US and the EU regulation-wise seem to be going into this direction, that they either impose very strict travel rules and only allow to go from custodian to custodian, or they just generally try to remove the ability to use Bitcoin peer-to-peer. That's all these things together kind of make me think that we might actually lose Bitcoin for what it was meant to be. And even in the sense that it will just keep going up and up and up because it's absolutely scarce, even that can be lost very easily in this.
Yeah, I think, part of me still feels like maybe we get a very weak all-time high, even below 100K, maybe below, 120, 125 something. And I mean, I already said in the past that I had a bit of a theory, maybe we wouldn't even kind of hit the all-time high, but maybe we sort of limp past it. Then everybody's kind of a bit over it. The supply, like you're saying, the mining supply is just less of a change than it has been in the past. And then we just go back into a bear market and everybody has to confront a reality where without surging retail adoption, you can't really have a crypto euphoria. But I take that that's a minority opinion, and maybe the mega bulls will be right. Who knows? Okay, we got Chaumian eCash, which you were going to explain on the show last time, but we didn't really get around to it. So this is, to be clear, not XCC, not the eCash, which split off and rebranded from BCH, but is instead related to David Chaum and sort of actually pre-Bitcoin ideas of how you could do cryptocurrency. I've had a quick read of this, but I'm not any kind of an expert, so break it down for me. What is eCash and why is everybody super excited about that in BTC, and certainly has been for the last year or so?
All right. So the basic idea behind Chaumian eCash is to create an electronic system where you at least have similar privacy to physical cash, or maybe even better. But it's more like a system where cash is not understood in the sense that we understand today, that it is something issued by the state, basically, some mint or whatever. But it is a cash that is issued by a private bank and only redeemed by that particular bank. Like that is the Chaumian eCash version. That it is a closed and centralized system where a single issuer redeems the tokens. And of course, you can create recreate all sorts of historic things like clearing houses and the banks accepting each other's notes and exchanging them and doing the node dwelling thing and trying to bankrupt each other maybe and stuff like that. So that's certainly possible, but in Bitcoin we have this thing called the Lightning Network, which basically acts as an instant clearing house easily. So none of that is required. We don't need any underlying asset warehouse, and we don't need these banks keeping a tab on each other and extending credit to each other and stuff like that, because they can basically instantly clear over Lightning, and they can probably be able to afford like 30 liquid Lightning channels between each other, and when you redeem a token in one mint, you can issue a new token in another mint, and basically you can have electronic cash where you are not as surveilled as in contemporary account-based systems. And I want to get into a little bit about what is a token, because most people, when they hear token, they think it's shitcoin, and someone is just trying to print their own money, and it's going to be dumped on retail, and that's at its basis, at its core, token is a transferable form of authorization to access a resource. So that's what it is, and it can be done a lot of different ways. Like you can be issued a token when you do your authentication, and that token allows you to access the website and do your things without getting nagged constantly at every click of the mouse to authenticate yourself. So you can use this token to access your account and send money from a centralized ledger to another centralized ledger. That's certainly possible. That's how banking applications work. In this case, the token is just a node token. But in eCash systems, the token actually represents the authorization to move the money. So it is not connected to a physical identity or personal identity or anything, or pseudo-identity even. It's just the identity is itself the token that authorizes you to spend it. So a $100 bill can be tokenized in such a way that they cannot really distinguish it from other $100 bills. I mean, there are systems like Webcash, if you are familiar with it, that do not have the Chaumian blinding. That means the operator can actually track the exchanges of these tokens, and it's not really cash-like because it can be analyzed and pretty well traced. It does not have the privacy provided, but it is cash-like in the sense that it is a period token, and it has no relationship to an identity, strictly speaking. But it's kind of like a promise that I promise I will not track you, and not log your IP and your actions and who you transacted with and stuff like that. And less like in Chaumian eCash, it's cryptographically basically ensured, guaranteed that the issuance and the redemption of a token cannot be linked because the thing is blinded. And to come back, people talk about Fedmints and there is Cashew. These are the two main implementations in Bitcoin of Chaumian eCash right now. And Fedmints is a much more ambitious project. It focuses on stuff like these federations have Byzantine fault tolerant way of interacting, where even if one party turns outright malicious, he cannot sabotage the operation of the mint. And they have this threshold signature scheme to hold the funds on chain, and it's a much more complicated, much more ambitious project. But in the end, it boils down to a federation and its members, threshold number of members being honest, and that's the security assumption. However, the big difference to a sidechain, like a federated sidechain, if we can call liquid a sidechain, I mean, opinions differ on that. But if you are willing to extend the name sidechain to something like that, especially if you do not have confidential transactions. Sorry. So if you do not have confidential transactions, then funds locked into a sidechain can be accounted for always on the sidechain. So you basically have zero risk of debasement. There is no stealth debasement, and if everything is like ideal, then the consensus of the sidechain does not even know any form of debasement. But in case of federated eCash system, the outstanding IOUs, the outstanding liabilities have no relationship with the funds that the mint holds. So that's like one big issue that a lot of people, including myself, raised alarm bells about that. You are basically handing out money printers to everyone and their mother, because the idea behind Fedimint is that this could be like community run mints and systems where some village elders who are very highly esteemed and trusted anyhow, and maybe they already control the resources of the village to a large degree, then they could be like custodians. But there are many issues with this. Like, you cannot really, although we like to say this, be your own bank in Bitcoin, you cannot actually replicate the physical and cyber security, the economy of scale for physical and cyber security that the bank has. Like, it doesn't work out. There is a reason why banks have that security and can offer that security, because they serve many people, and that's why it scales up. And the equivalent to that in Bitcoin land would be like a trusted cosigner, right? So if you have a trusted cosigner that specializes in securing physically and again from cyber threats the keys, the signing keys, and they can help you get that security without giving up self-custody. In cases these Fedimints, the smaller ones are definitely going to be, pretty vulnerable to various forms of attacks, be it cyber or physical. So the $5 wrench attack can actually work and stuff like that. But they might be better than giving your money to some internet rondo where that is not even, accessible to the legal system if he runs away and drives everyone. So a lot of people think that it is actually preferable if you do know your custodians and you have a personal relationship with them. So that's the other side of the story. So that's Fedimint. I'm not super familiar with Fedimint cryptographically. I'm more familiar with Cashew. Cashew uses a Schnorr signature system. Fedimint uses some BLS cryptography, and I'm not super familiar with. The one open question I have about that, and I don't know the answer to that, is the Fedimint BLS signature verifiable by third parties or not? Because in Cashew, and generally in Chaumian eCash, the signature of this blind signature of the mint is only recognizable to the mint itself, like the one that has the private key, and that again creates like a systemic risk of fraud, kind of, sort of, and the way this has been worked around in Cashew was basically the introduction of DLAC proofs. And these DLAC proofs prove to you, the user, that the mint actually use the private key that he was supposed to use to create a signature. And the problem is that, again, in the standard delay proofs for Cashew, is that you actually have to reveal your blinding factor, the thing that ensures that the issuance and the redemption of the token cannot be linked. You have to reveal that to prove it out to a third party. So that's kind of a limitation it has, but that you only need to do that in case there is fraud attempt. Like if the mint tries to deny that the signature is his, then you kind of have to undo this thing. And to get back on the Cashew thing, just very shortly, how eCash systems work, or if you have some questions, maybe I can pause for a bit.
Yeah, so my view of it is, like, for my listeners, the way I sort of understand this system is basically you can imagine a system like Bitcoin, in terms of you would have a Bitcoin wallet type of an eCash wallet type of software that handles your cryptography for you. But instead of having mining, you basically have somebody who runs the mint. And then other than that, you have a private system amongst yourself, and also the mint cannot, in theory, inflate the supply. Like, the mint is able to hand out money, people transact around the money amongst themselves, and the mint doesn't necessarily have oversight of that. It just knows that when people send their money back, that it was money that they originally issued. So it's essentially almost like it would be better than Bitcoin, except for that one critical, key point of having the mint kind of be in charge of the supply, and also vulnerable to getting shut down, which is why, as a precursor to Bitcoin, it was then exciting when Bitcoin came up, because it was like, well, we made a few compromises sort of with the transparency of the ledger and so forth, handing out a copy to everyone, but we've got rid of that central mint. That was the innovation. So there's kind of, that's the deal with the devil you're striking there to get this system, right?
Yeah, so I have to push back on the idea that the mint cannot overissue of its tokens, because it totally can. It's a fully trusted entity. You have to understand that it can defraud users in a variety of ways. And in the standard Chaumian eCash implementation in Cashew, the simplest way it's done, it's super lightweight, it's very simple. Someone was able to just sit down, and write it. It's super simple and very nice, but the mint is 100% trusted. Like, if you trust the mint, it works perfectly. The only thing you do not trust it on is basically your privacy assumptions, sort of. But it can hold the funds hostage. It can lie about stuff, and in the first simplest implementation, and that makes it like 100% similar to custodial Lightning, basically. The big difference is really, I can't stress it enough, is the privacy. Like, in custodial Lightning, you are already at the mercy of the service provider. It's basically a bank. It can deny you service. It can censor you. It can stop you from paying invoices it doesn't like. Or of course, usually this is not initiated by the private sector. People need to understand that these idiotic ideas usually come from the regulators. The nanny state, the great coroning that we are having, and when they get large and trustable, then these financial providers are easy target for the regulators that come in and say, listen, do you want to continue your business that you make millions of dollars each year, or you want to get shut down? And these are the conditions. You have to KYC all your users, you have to enforce AML regulation, and you have to report to the tax authority, and they can buy meat over their carbon credits, and they can travel abroad when there is lockdowns. And the reason why banks suck is not because they choose to suck, but kind of it's this public-private partnership that the VF is pushing. That this is the end result. That the state just gets into your wallet and your life, surveils and controls everything that it can. And that is why, compared to custodial Lightning, which is right now the only viable way to scale Bitcoin to the masses, Chaumian eCash is super popular because it at least does not allow for this micromanagement of people's lives, because it really just is more cash-like in this regard. It's not like an account. Like I said, these tokens are bearer tokens. They carry their own authorization, and they are not linkable. And that again makes it more like a question on how you compare a credit card to cash,
Yes.
or a bank card to cash. Yeah. And you have zero privacy with bank cards. Everybody hopefully knows that you have absolutely zero privacy with the current way of doing any electronic payment system, Google Pay or PayPal or whatever you do. It's all the same crap. And custodial Lightning is supposed to be all the same crap. And this is custodial Lightning basically, because like I said, otherwise you can only pay people inside the mint. But if you have the Lightning Network, then you can pay people in different mints. You can pay merchants directly, directly by the intermediation of the mint, of course, or the Lightning Bridge. And so the privacy thing is what people like about Chaumian eCash, really. That's the big thing about it. And it has this electronic cash feeling, this bearer note electronic cash feeling. I can send you electronic cash notes over an encrypted chat. I don't need to pay a transaction fee. I don't need to get into the mempool. You don't need to wait for confirmation. You don't need to be online. I can just send you an encrypted message in a private chat app, and you can redeem it at your leisure. So what happens in eCash systems usually is that when you receive a note from someone, they still control the secrets to that note. So it's kind of like giving you a transaction that they signed, but it's not in the block yet. And what they have to do is they have to present this note to the mint and ask it to issue a new note where only they know the secret. And that is how a transaction is made in Chaumian eCash. And of course, the mint has no idea if you transact it with yourself, like just exchange different denominations of eCash notes to yourself, or if it is someone else who is redeeming it. Absolutely have no idea. This is the beautiful unlinkability property of Chaumian eCash. By the way, it has a very easily rememberable equation, because you just have to remember KIC in this notation at least. Because we usually call in our discussion when we discuss cashew protocol the secret X, small x, and it corresponds to a point on the curve we call large Y, and the secret that the mint knows, the private key is a small k, and capital K is the public key, and when you multiply this Y point with the private key of the mint, the ky, then that equals C, the actual signature, and that is the equation that the mint uses basically to verify your token. Now, like I said, by default, the mint is the only one who can tell if this XC pair is a valid signature, because you need the private key to verify, as you can see. And the only one who can tell that it has not been spent, because it maintains a database of spent X values. And if the X is already known to him, then he will tell you that you are trying to double spend on him. Or maybe someone that gave you the eCash double spent you. And of course, the mint can just lie about it, because when you present X and C, then the mint can say, sorry, this is a double spend. And it can basically steal from the users that way. And the user have absolutely no way of proving otherwise. So it has all these problems. Like I said, if you trust the mint 100%, it's a very good system, very lean. It's perfect for micropayments, even sub-Satoshi micropayments. It's such a great way to have electronic cash. But on the other hand, the mint, if it's malicious for whatever reason, there are a lot of ways it can screw you, and it can simply just not do whatever you ask him to do. Like you give him a Lightning invoice or ask him to pay an on-chain transaction, and he can just take your notes and say, I will do it, and then not do it. Like all these things, that you know, the trade-off is really like overall really bad by default. And people assume that the mint will not do that for the same reason banks did not do this historically, or usually tried not to do this, because it means it's over. Their reputation is ruined, their business is over. If they have long-term business plans, you know, then they will not do it. That's the idea. There are a couple of problems with that idea, by the way, because, you know, it seems like historically, like our banking and financial history shows that gambling with customer funds is an irresistible temptation. Like custodians, when the funds are just sitting there and they can lend them out and get yield on them, you know, they are able to resist it for a little while, and then when people get comfortable with the situation, it just starts to happen, and then it will spiral out, and then there is a liquidity crunch, and everyone wants their actual, you know, quote hard cash, then the whole thing collapses because the bank cannot pay its liabilities, because there is a time duration mismatch, sort of, even if they are not outright malicious and not just stealing customer funds, even then there is a problem. And that's when customers will immediately lose faith in the mint or the bank, if you like, and that's when the bank runs happen, and that's when, you know, all those sad pictures where masses are gathering in front of banks and are not getting their money back. And the insiders, of course, knew this is going to happen, so they are long gone and long got away with their money. And people are holding these worthless bags of IOUs and stuff like that. So that is kind of coded into this system. But there are good news. There's good news as well, because you actually can create a very good proof of liability scheme for Chaumian eCash. So Kali BTC have wrote a very long form piece on that. I have a short, very short, just a few lines of description how it works. And it is basically doing in the background a continuous automated bank run sort of thing, where eCash nodes expire and people's wallets are automatically swapping these eCash nodes over to newer eCash nodes. And when the mint operates normally, this just happens in the background automatically. Like, it does not actually bother the users necessarily. And you can create burn and mint proofs for these things, and the users can check if the attestation contains their proofs. Again, this is done by the wallet in the background, and your wallet will start screaming at you if it did not see the proper burn or mint attestation. So you are just using the eCash wallet as you would like. Of course, it does things in the background and talks to the mint, and the mint has to do this attestation. For example, it can timestamp its attestations to the Bitcoin blockchain for immutability and stuff like that. The technical details are not as important. What's important is that this makes eCash protocol a lot less lightweight. It makes it more like a blockchain, sort of, sadly. So you have data availability issues suddenly. People need to audit these data dumps, and they have to be available and all that sort of thing. But the good news is that eventually, like after a few months, this data gets basically obsoleted and of no concern to anyone, because when you do these rollovers and the mint is forced to include the burn attestations in these the burn proofs in these attestations, if it issued more liabilities, I think it was Jeremy. If you issue more liabilities, then you are back.
Go on. Yeah, I'm here.
if the mint issues more liabilities than it had reserves, that it had the right to do, and you can again tally up its supposed reserves and the mint proofs and the term proofs and stuff. So it would include fake term proofs to be allowed to mint more. But when it is forced to include attestations for a period where everyone is swaps over, it will become apparent that it actually overprinted. And so basically why you cannot detect immediately that the mint is over its quota, it cannot just snowball, always debasing the users by a small percent that it goes unnoticed. In fact, it would get immediately noticed within like a 30, 60-day period of that happening. And then it's game over. Like usually banks try to plan for years ahead and are not going to take the risk. That's the idea. So while it is not perfect, it is actually pretty damn good. The issue is more about the proof of reserves. So proof of reserves has the problem. People think Bitcoin is perfect for that, but what does a signature actually mean? Like how much a signature would cost you? If you just wanted to buy the signature and not 1,000 BTC, you just wanted to buy a signature that you control is 1,000 BTC, would that cost you $50, right? And stuff like that. So proof of reserves is nasty. Proof of reserves on Lightning in Lightning channels is even nastier than on chain. So it's weird because while traditionally people used to think the proof of reserve is solved with Bitcoin, and proof of liabilities is impossible with custodial systems are very hard, and then eCash systems cannot do it. They are so private. The truth is, eCash systems can do pretty solid proof of liability schemes, but the proof of reserve part is not actually solved. There is always potential for fraud there, and there is always a potential where you are talking about a legal entity that they have liabilities that supersede the depositor's claims. I'm pretty sure you are familiar with situations where people thought they are going to get their money back, and then it turns out that the FTX or whatever had liabilities that it would have to pay for someone else, and then the IRS swoops in and say, "Nope, it's mine." Sorry, yes. Everyone's wrecked, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I'm following all this is making sense to me. So basically, the BTC layer 1 upgrades and scaling plan is like stalled at the protocol level. So then Lightning was going to be the solution, but then people have discovered problems with that, especially as they've increasingly sort of shifted into custodial Lightning. So the community is now trying to figure out a better alternative that might not be as good as another solution, but at least it's better than custodial Lightning. So they've hit on this Chaumian eCash, and that has great privacy, but the problem that you're trusting the custodian who's essentially holding the BTC backing the eCash notes. So they've now added that custodian, but at the same time they've fixed the privacy. And then once they've got that going, now it's kind of like, well, what can we do to mitigate the risk of the custodian, which is like automatically checking the liabilities and federating the number of custodians somehow. And the hope is that with, I guess, some new discoveries or something, this will eventually get to a point that it's workable in small community. Like, don't you also have a liquidity fracturing problem? Because if you and I are on a Chaumian mint, that's great. But then if Jet is on a different one, then we're going to need to either have our mints cooperate, in which case you've reintroduced like the banking system, or we have to settle through layer 1, right? So isn't that also kind of a weakness?
I mean, if you are book settling large amounts, then layer 1 might work, but we expect that to be like too expensive. What I said earlier is that the Lightning Network actually can just obviate the need for clearing houses and off-chain obscure clearing mechanisms and warehousing and all that sort of stuff, because the mints can actually be peers in the Lightning Network, and they can trustlessly transact between each other over Lightning, especially if they are doing book settlements, because as you know, HTSs are a bit of a LARP on the Lightning Network if the amount is so small that it's not economically enforceable on chain.
Yes.
Like if you cannot push the HTSC on chain and recover some meaningful amount from that, then it is a bit of a LARP. And the nodes will not even include HTRCs. Actually, they will not do the commitments to the HTRCs on Lightning channels where it's like dust amount. Like there is absolutely no reason to do that. What they do instead is they update the balance so that amount that is in the limbo until Lightning first locks in the funds into HTRCs and then gets settled out as the secret is revealed. In that period before that happens, there is a potential for the channel to close. And if you cannot economically include the HTRC, then both parties will lose because the funds go to the miners. So that's kind of the game theory. Why people are saying these are small amounts anyhow, like below dust. Like, what are you going to do with that? Even if you could reclaim it on chain, you can't spend it economically, like it's gone anyhow. So might as well give it to the miners. And if neither party is a miner, then you can sort of like assume that it's not in their interest to cheat with these small amounts. So yes, Lightning has this little bit of LARP with the small amounts, but large amounts absolutely like settle instantly and trustlessly, or can settle instantly and trustlessly over Lightning. They don't necessarily do, by the way. So HTSs can live for pretty long time. You can actually do escrow stuff with HTSs, like you lock in funds, someone knows the preimage, neither party knows the preimage, someone knows the preimage. And that someone will release the funds if certain conditions are met, like the goods are actually delivered and this is proven out or something, and then they release the funds. So you can do stuff like this. You can do order invoices. Let's not go there. The point is, if these means have Lightning channels with each other, they can clear instantly. Like that's not a problem. So a lot of people are saying Chaumian eCash means are having the renaissance on Bitcoin now because Bitcoin and Lightning made that like a viable thing. Because you can actually pay a merchant who's not part of that mint. If a merchant can give you a Lightning invoice, then you can just pay them, and it's a really good wallet user experience. I can only recommend trying it out. If you go to kashu.space, I think you will find various web wallets. So it doesn't take actually much to try it out, like a few satoshis. You can try it out with a few satoshis, and it's a pretty good user experience. What you have to understand about Lightning is the backup scheme is not Chaumian eCash is the backup scheme is not like what we are used to with blockchains. Blockchains create a data availability layer, and although they pose problems, and opinions differ on how big these scalability problems are, but in the Bitcoin camp, they are largely thought to be like just too bad, and that's why we are trying blockchain scaling. You have this awesome property that everything that you need to recover except for your seed phase is on the blockchain. Like you have everything there really, and that means if you do know your seed phase, you can recover your funds without the assistance of anyone. So that's the great thing about blockchains. You have this awesome backup scheme. With Chaumian eCash, you have these nodes. These are bearer nodes. If you lose them, you lose them, like you lost your cash. If your browser crashes or whatever, and you have eCash in there, you lost it. So you have to manually back up in the web wallets, or you have to have an application that automatically creates encrypted backups and uploads them to the cloud. These are solvable problems. You have to understand that these are all solvable problems, but the basic property of eCash is that it's a bearer asset and you can lose it, and it needs to be backed up. And and the other thing I wanted to get into, I know this is a lot, and I cover a lot of ground, but like I told about, the eCash means can defraud you in a lot of ways. They can lie in a lot of ways, and that is why. And one counter argument to the proof of reserves and liability scheme was that that the mint could screw you otherwise. Like you are 100% trusting it, it can lie in various ways. You can just not pay your invoice, and you have basically no way of proving that. So if the mint just gives you some 500 internal server error, you can start screaming, and if people take the side of the user, then an honest mint can be very easily ruined. The reputation can be ruined, and they can be defrauded very easily because the user can do the fraud. If the mint is always, because it's more reputable, it's thought to be correct, then the mint can actually like commit these frauds and get away with it. So neither is good. It would really pay if we could know, like it would be provable to a third party or the public who committed the fraud, who was acting in bad faith. And fortunately, that is possible. So I don't want to go in total detail on the fraud proofs, but the basic idea is that if we go back to this equation in the beginning, this is how the mint checks the validity of an eCash node. So instead of giving it the X value and the C value, what you would do in a fraud proof is you would give it the Y value, and the Y value is basically the corresponding point on the curve. Now you have to understand that in Chaumian eCash, if you give the mint the Y value and the C value, so the point that corresponds to the secret and the blind signature, that is something that the mint cannot know if not a forgery. Like I can create 1 billion tokens by just adding the same number, the same point, the generator point n times or whatever. I just keep adding to both of them, and they will still have this relationship by the mint's private key. So I could actually ruin a mint in a very short order if he accepted the buy. But to get the secret from Y, you actually need to reverse SHA-256 or some other hash function, and that is super hard. So that's how we know that if you present the X value, then you cannot just create another token out of thin air from one signature. You cannot actually just tweak the signature and the. But first, with the fraud rules, first you would actually present the mint with a Y and C value. And the mint would check its database. It would have to store, instead of the secret, like right now, Cashew identifies 10 tokens with the secret. But it has to be changed for fraud rules, and it would either store Y or C or a hash of them. It doesn't really matter. The point is that it needs to remember and be able to check if it already knows a signature, basically. And the secret only gets revealed later. First, we make the mint sign a commitment. Commitment does not mean cryptographic commitment here, but more like a contract or something like that. I'm saying that if you can show me the secret to this point Y, because otherwise the signature looks good to me. Like the points are related by my private key, and I do not know this signature. This has not been spent in my database, so it looks good. The private key represents 100 Satoshis, and it is mine. So if you can show me the X value, then I will pay this Lightning invoice for 100 Satoshis. And this Lightning invoice has this payment hash. So what happens here is that if the mint does sign this, then basically you can prove out if they did not pay the Lightning invoice, because if he paid the Lightning invoice, he has to know the payment secret to that public key, to that hash that is the payment hash in the Lightning invoice. So again, you can call him out on his bullshit. If he says this is not my signature, then we are going back to the delay proof part, where you can actually, by revealing your blinding factor, or if you have the second delay proof that I figured out, you can actually ask for a second delay proof. It just has to be an asynchronous operation. The first delay proof is always given with the token, the blinded token, the blinded signature. But if you immediately ask for the second, then it will be able to link basically the C value to this otherwise unlinkable C prime value. So we don't want that. We don't want that. It has to be an asynchronous background process, but you can actually request a deal approve from the mint, where it will prove it to you that the C actual, so the blind signature actual, is his signature. That's the point. And you can actually prove with this to a third party, like a third party can verify this. And even if the mint happens to be this third party, like he as I said, Bob, we call the mint Bob. Usually Bob can actually pretend to be a Carol and can be on the other side. But even if you prove it to him, he cannot link your original blinded. So how the whole thing starts is that you create this blinded message basically from Y by multiplying it with the secret nodes that only you know. So he will not know that, he will not be able to link stuff. So either you reveal your blinding factor and use the first deal approve, or you acquire the second deal approve. It doesn't really matter, because you can now go public and show that the mint is lying. Like that is actually his signature. You can prove it out. If he commits to a lie, if he signs a message that this is not my signature, you can show that he lies. So he will not do that. We can assume that if the mint will immediately ruin its reputation without a question, he will not do that, right? Now, there is another thing that he can say. He can say that I actually know this C signature, even though he does not. But then you say, okay, the way he has to say that is by have to respond to you with the secret, with the X value. So basically he has to give you a message that for this and this and these C values, I know the X values, so these are double spent, please try somewhere else with this bullshit. If he cannot, then it's not a valid rejection. So he has no valid way to reject this thing. Again, you can go public. You can say the mint is not honoring its promises, and the mint has to respond in a reasonable amount of time. This is how fraud work. They are a challenge response game where you have timeouts, and someone has to observe the timing of the events to be able to tell who is a fraud, right? So you have to see that the mint stop playing the game. Because if you cannot observe that the mint stopped playing the game, then you can always pretend he did that and just carry on. Anyhow, these fraud proofs need to, I believe, I strongly believe, need to be implemented in Cashew, because there is this whole thing and make it possible for everyone to know without a doubt who's committing fraud, if it's played out in public or in front of an arbiter. And where I am building up to with all this, but I'm going to pause a little bit so you can ask your questions, is I believe we can do Chaumian cash in a non-custodial way. And we can still take advantage of the positive things about Chaumian cash, like its privacy, its suitability for micropayments. Right? These are awesome properties that it interacts with the Lightning Network very well. We actually like it as a wallet experience very much. What we don't like is it's creating a systemic risk of debasement and rug pulls. That's the problem with it. And doing something about that is something that a lot of people are putting serious time and effort, including Kali, who basically wrote Cashew single-handedly, or at least started it. He is putting a lot of time and energy into trying to figure out how to make it rug resistant, even though it was very much agreed upon in the beginning that that's impossible. so that's what I want to do. But if you have questions with what we talked about with Fraudtoshi.
Yeah, well, my question, I think you were already just getting onto the answer a little bit there, which is what I'm kind of hearing is this is actually like a very complicated system with a whole set of different interlinked incentives and so forth. So what I really wanted to hear you riff on a bit, and you were starting to there, was like, are you bullish on this actually being a working solution for users? What kind of time frame would we be expecting, and could this then conceivably solve BTC scaling issues like at scale, right? If there was a way to make non-custodial mints but still have the privacy and also the interactivity with Lightning Network, even if you have some federated hubs or something. Is that going to be enough?
No, I believe no. But it helps a lot. Like, I can't stress enough how good the user experience it is, and the privacy and the lightweightness of the Chaumian eCash protocol. Really, like, it's a super lightweight thing, and it can be used for a lot of different things. Like, it does not have to be a bank. Everyone is always focusing on the banking aspects of it. It does not have to be a bank. Everywhere where you have micropayments for streaming, I mean, a lot of people in the BSV community, are hell-bent on doing streaming micropayments on chain. That makes absolutely no sense to me. Like, if there is something that the blockchain is not suited to, is that. But of course, they are trying to do a lot of things that blockchains are super not suited to with blockchains out of sheer stubbornness. So I don't know.
Yes.
But you get the idea that everywhere where you pay, you click at an article. You want to just read an article, and there is a paywall there. And instead of giving out your credit card info, doing a monthly subscription or any of that bullshit, you can just put in the authorization field in the HTTP request an eCash token and just pay for reading that article without any hassle. Right? Your browser can ask you, this request will cost you like 50 cents. Do you want to? Yes. And that's it. Like, no credit cards, no names, no subscriptions, no annoying bullshit. Just a private experience where you actually can pay for resources. And this works beautifully, kind of, with Chaumian eCash. And
So what kind of time frame do you think there will be versions of this in beta? There's no need for a layer 1 BTC upgrade for any of this, right?
No. Chaumian eCash is basically, we are trying to make sure that in a future where Bitcoin prematurely ossifies and we can't actually scale its properties to billions of people, that future is at least not as horrible, where you are just in an account-based, surveilled and controlled panopticon relationship with a provider and with the state through the provider. Like, that is more like a contingency plan when you are talking about scaling. But as I said, it scales micropayments pretty damn well. So in the credit eCash version, because we have talked about debit eCash mostly. Debit eCash means you give your Bitcoin to someone and they give you eCash tokens, and then you can spend it over Lightning or withdraw it or whatever. Credit eCash means it's like a credit card. The tokens don't actually represent IOUs. They represent your available balance to draw on credit. So basically, your credit limit is turned into eCash, and that means that it is not linkable to your person. It is not linkable between purchases. You buy a coffee, you buy a train ticket, the two things cannot be linked. With a credit card right now, the bank and, let's say, any state agency that they have an API with can see everything. And then they may be able to stop you from doing certain things personally. This whole CBDC thing, people rant about how social credit scores and CBDCs open up the possibility. This presupposes that CBDCs are implemented with an account model. I don't believe they will be. I hope they will not be. But if they are implanted with an account model, these things all become possible. And these things all become possible with custodial Lightning. Like, they are not in any way better than CBDC. And anyone that says that is smoking crack. Like, no. And the current banking system is also horrible. Like, these are bad things. But with Chaumian eCash, we kind of saw this hyper-velocity private electronic cash thing. And it can actually exist with a compromise too. So when we are talking about CBDC, is a little deal. You can do a system where the spending of eCash happens to accounts. So that means you can spend at PSC merchants, but your wallet, your personal details are not linked to that payment. But when they are surveilling the flows in the system, they can see if like a corner traffic is moving millions of dollars that will glow in the dark. Like, when you are just looking at the system and looking at how much traffic anyone should have, if they are laundering money for some drug lord, then they will glow up. and you can still have some measure of overview on the funds, but you cannot absolutely cannot trace individuals and their spending habits, and you cannot control the people, and you cannot like micromanage their lives and their purchasing decisions and any of that. And that seems like a compromise that might be livable to the overbearing nanny state and to the private citizen as well.
What kind of timeline? Give me the bottom number. This year, next year?
Cash works right now, but like I said, right now it exists as almost 100% trusted. But I say almost because they already implemented the first deal approve. So the first deal approve means that the mint cannot actually lie about its signature. So that is the one thing that the mint is not fully trusted on right now. But they can still commit fraud in other ways, and they can of course track you anytime, and they can of course mint like I think Floppy, this guy, if you know him, he created a Chaumian cash mint and minted 22 million bitcoins. Just to prove that, that the idea that this somehow will have any relationship to on-chain Bitcoin is sort of like a childish dream, as things are. And so that is the state. Chaumian eCash on the cash side is super usable right now, like it exists. We are hoping that within a year, the Fraudtoshi will get incorporated into a fork of Cashu or Cashu. And if Fraudtoshi are in place, you can do credit eCash, because the idea of credit eCash is that you create an escrow, a 2-of-2 escrow, sort of like a Lightning channel. But instead of doing this thing with Lightning, that is super privacy invasive, really, because the channel peers know everything that the other is doing on the channel, obviously. And if your channel peer is a large Lightning service provider that collects information from everyone, it's a hub and spoke for that, and they see every transaction, every invoice, everything that you do. If these cooperate, what I call the SMTPification and PayPalification of Lightning, that can happen, especially if the current trends continue, then very easily we can get to a point where it's very surveilled and permission to do anything on Lightning, and even to anyone could open a channel in theory, just like anyone could run an SMTP server in theory. You are not going to be able to pay a merchant or interact with other people in the system unless you are in the Google approved part of the Lightning network, and that's a big danger. And so that's kind of the bad shit that is going on there. And but I wanted to go with this is so you have a much better, much more flexible channel, sort of. You have a payment channel that works on different principles than Lightning. The main difference is Lightning is kind of, like I said, aside from Dust HTRCs, aside from that, it is always enforceable on chain. Like at any moment, the transactions, the latest commitments can be put on chain and can be settled, and so it is all payments above the Dust limit are 100% enforceable on chain. It's real Bitcoin that gets moved and stuff like that. Now in credit eCash, if you do this escrow, then you are basically locking up funds in a collaborative and more symmetric task model setting. You do not have unilateral exit. You cannot have unilateral exit because that would open up to fraud. Right? This has to be a cooperative resolution, and the worst case, you have to employ an arbitration body. Since you cannot actually do the eCash fraud proofs on chain on Bitcoin, as the Bitcoin script VM is right now, you cannot actually prove out fraud proofs on chain. Maybe, just maybe, I don't want to throw too much hoping around that, maybe BitVM will allow to actually play out a Turing complete fraud proof like this in a way that does not involve a trust oracle. But in the credit eCash idea, you generally both bring an oracle. So you are 4 parties, you both have your trusted oracle, and 3 of them has to agree with, so the 2 oracles have to agree with one side or the other. That's kind of how it is in the simplest way. And that is only if it goes to arbitration at all. If you read the paper, it's not very likely that it will go to arbitration. aside from in this weird situation where either party just dies, so that the mint goes offline, gets faded, or the user actually dies or loses his keys. So you have these weird edge cases where 2 of 2 is just a horrible solution. But in every other situation where people are actually like cooperating, it's not expected. They don't have a motivation to try to cheat because they are not gaining anything by it, and they can lose money, definitely. So credit eCash mint dragging is going to lose a lot of money. The user who stops cooperating with the mint is going to lose his over collateral at least. So he's losing money on that by being an asshole. So again, it's a pretty good trust assumption. And like I said, it can be for amounts that are expressive on chain. So most people's credit card balance is somewhere in the $1,000 to $10,000 region, at least in the developed world. That is what we are talking about. If $1,000 to $10,000 cannot be expressed economically on chain, we have like super huge problems with Bitcoin. At that point, there is definitely going to be a civil war, I expect. So I think that's kind of going to work. But even if in the far future that might not work, you can still pack these credit eCash escrows into covenant scaling structures, for example. You add another layer of probabilistic scaling because most people are honest. So it's very rare that you have to push on chain and resolve this thing. So in those rare circumstances, you incur some extra cost. But let's say that's like 2 in a million cases or something like that, because people are really just incentivized to cooperate. So it scales similarly to Lightning, actually. And it, again, provides you excellent privacy because you get issued this credit limit. It's not an IOU, actually. The IOU basically is the absence of these eCash tokens. So in credit eCash, when you spend it, when you redeem it at the mint, you cannot be able to show them later. Like you have to show the full balance later, or you have to pay the difference. It's exactly like a credit card. Credit cards are used by billions of people, at least 1 billion people, I think, worldwide. It's a very, very good way to handle your monthly weekly spending budget. If you always pay, you don't pay a penalty, but they are super privacy invasive. So that's why it works, because you actually are paying with your personal life, your personal data for this bullshit. And also, of course, merchants are pricing their expenses in, and that gets distributed. So it's a weird prisoner dilemma, really, if you think about it. Like the credit card system, when you get cash back, you are incentivized to become a participant in this. But as more and more people participate, the merchants are going to charge that 2 to 6% extra cost by raising the prices. And basically people who do not participate, who pay with cash, are the ones who are financing everyone else. So again, they are incentivized to join this fucking scam. And then parts of that will be redistributed to the people, but the prices are raised by 6%, and you get back 1 to 2% in the end. That's the end game of this scam. Then almost everyone is using credit cards, right? So that's a bit of a shit show. And again, like I said, it's a complete privacy nightmare, and it can be 100% centrally controlled. And people are thinking that CBDCs are somehow worse than the current system. I can guarantee that the bank will not decline a full call from the state if they ask to cancel someone's subscription or account, freeze the account, or put whatever spending or withdrawing limitations. Like this actually happens all the time. The government phones the bank and tells people are not allowed to withdraw more than $50 or euros a day from the ATMs. And the next day it's in effect. And you cannot actually escape, because by the time you know it, by the time you wake up, it's already in effect. So
I have a couple.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just curious. So is this supposed to be an alternative to Lightning? Is it supposed to be complementary to Lightning? Okay.
The thing about Lightning is that the last mile user experience absolutely sucks. Like people are realizing it now that it is too expensive to open your own Lightning channel. It's too cumbersome to manage the liquidity. You are still trusting the LSP to a great degree, but at least you are incurring full on-chain expenses of that UTX.
And so the end goal of this is to get like as many normie users on it to help the overall system scale, right?
I think the real end game is to create peer-to-peer electronic cash, but a different way than you would on a blockchain. Like peer-to-peer means that two people can meet on the street and they can exchange volume. You can give me a pirated CD and I can give you eCash, and nobody can really stop this transaction. That's what it means to me, if we are not getting anal about the technicals. But I'm not sure if Bitcoin's peer-to-peer stands up technically anyhow. So and of course you have various intermediaries in this scheme. So it's not peer-to-peer in the sense that you do not have intermediaries. It's peer-to-peer in the sense that nobody can really reasonably stop this or censor this or permission this. So it allows for peer-to-peer trade. It allows for something electronically used as cash. Because again, if you have a PayPal account, PayPal can just say, oh, you did this, we are canceling your account, and you're, by the way, you're not seeing your balance back. We want a system where what you do with your money is your business.
Yeah.
And it works for micropayments that are on Bitcoin, definitely are not expressible economically on chain. That's 100%. Even if people could afford their own Lightning nodes in the future and own Lightning channels, we know that the micropayments, the daily payments that they would make, is not going to be economically enforceable or viable on Bitcoin, right? Of course, the big block scaling paradigm says that those things should actually be economically viable on chain.
Right.
So like the big divide. Yeah.
I have two more questions, and I think you already know exactly where I'm coming from for this, but I do want to hear your answers for. Okay, so is this something that can theoretically handle 8 billion people?
Yes. Yes, but there is a caveat. Like debit eCash can handle as many people as you want, but like I said, it's 100% trusted. I believe it's a reinvention of fractional reserve banking in the end. Very likely, there is a very strong chance that of course can handle 8 billion people. Why not? Credit eCash in the variant where you do not have a legal relationship with the bank, because states and legal systems are kind of allergic right now in this governing state of the world, allergic to privacy. So let's say they are not allowing these contracts in every places of the world or most places of the world. So in that sense, you cannot just have a contract like a credit card agreement that is enforced in the legal system that you have with most banks. Instead, you have to have like an escrow situation. In that case, in the cypherpunk encap version, there is a scaling limitation because it has the exact same scaling limitation as Lightning right now. And we are trying to resolve that with the Alliance proposal, for example, where we are trying to create a situation where multiple people, thousands of people can have Lightning channel in a single UTXO. And the same applies, like any Covenant pool would have virtual UTXOs that open to credit eCash channels. So imagine you have your savings in a Covenant pool, like something like a dark pool, and you have 1 million Satoshi UTXO, and you suddenly decide that you want to do some micropayments. Now that is a very slow and cumbersome way of updating things. That the cooperative multi-sig thing is very hard to move. But the operator can actually say, you know what, I'm going to credit you 1 million Satoshi if you sign a transaction from that BTXO to a credit eCash escrow. Right? I'm going to credit you this. I give you the eCash and you immediately can spend over Lightning, and we will settle this later. You either buy on exchange or get paid in Bitcoin, ideally in the long far future. Ideally you can get paid in Satoshi. You either get your Satoshis back or you are going to somehow settle with the mint, but it will be a different thing. Like you will do that later, and right now you can immediately spend your eCash. So yes, this is very scalable in theory, and especially for micropayments with privacy.
Okay, one more question. As someone who's completely outside of the crypto space, why would I choose this over any other cryptocurrency?
Yeah. I mean, we are getting into insane levels of complexity. Like the mental gymnastics are getting pretty crazy, but there is just no other way to deal with this culture that Bitcoin adopted that is super resistant to change and to scaling efforts in general. Like the do not change anything has been very strong in 2017, but it is super strong now. You have to see that people like Michael Saylor come in and spout this retarded bullshit. I don't know what to name this bullshit that he's saying, and are painting the Bitcoin developers as the devil, as the greatest threat to the Bitcoin network, and all sorts of stuff like that, right? By the way, MicroStrategy is pretty well embedded into the intelligence stuff. I know people found the hard proofs of that. So calling Michael Saylor spook is basically not a controversial thing, I believe, right now. But of course, most people don't see it that way, and they love the laser writing and the fluffing, the non-stop fluffing that he gives them, and what he's doing and whatever. I'm not really into that. Like, I still would very much like to see Bitcoin to become freedom money and peer-to-peer like cash. I don't give a fuck. There is a lot of reasons that I learned in the past years since 2017 for why this absolutely is needed for Bitcoin to remain freedom money and not be something that is basically just a stock traded around the regulated exchanges and is debased and undone in all its nice properties. So, yeah. Sorry, but
No, I feel like that, as if you answered all of my questions. This to me feels like almost an academic or an art piece where you have this goal and we differ on how to get to that goal. And it's like, okay, here's 8,000 limitations and restrictions I have to manage. We're going to make this work. And I can appreciate that, but I don't think as an end user, I give a shit about any of it.
Yeah, I can only recommend you guys trying out Chaumian eCash wallets because the UX is actually like super good. I have to say, again, if you for a moment forget that it's a 100 trusted custodial relationship, you just focus on the feeling of trading electronic cash this way. Like, don't have to run node, don't have to wait in the mempool, don't have to bribe the miners, don't have to...
Sounds like BCH to me. Like, but yeah.
I mean, BCH does all that, right? Not in the background, and it's cheap. But of course, this is the big philosophical divide between the Bitcoin tribe and the eCash tribe is that how you imagine this to work with billions of people.
Yes.
Bitcoiners don't actually believe it will work as well as you think it will work with big blocks, but on the other hand, right now, it's a super good user experience. I have to tell you that if you have something like an early days blockchain, in the sense that like Bitcoin was before 2015, like it was super good user experience. People transacted for almost nothing, like for peanuts, and they actually thought it has pretty decent privacy, of course, since we learned that it does not. But if the transactions are cheap, you can do coin joins, and those do matter somewhat. And you have this assurance that you are not getting debased. You have this very good backup scheme that we talked about. Like, it's a pretty good UX. And you are right in the sense that if there would be something that appreciates like Bitcoin, but offers that early days user experience, instead of this technological complexity cluster fund that we are building on it. But there is always a nuanced trade-off in layers upon layers. People would probably take the early days experience, like that's very likely. But first of all, a lot of us are skeptical about the scalability of that.
Yes.
And it probably will not give you the same property rights assurances as being on Bitcoin. So if you want to expose to Bitcoin the asset and you want to actually use it as electronic cash, right now, as things look like, you have to go and jump through these hoops. Like, there is just no way to do that on chain unless you are like a billionaire.
Indeed. So I wanted to ask you as well too about, you just mentioned that the ossification camp is essentially growing in strength and has been since 2017, which doesn't really surprised me. And with Sailor getting more cloud ETFs and so forth, it's all kind of trending in that direction. So that's bearish on any other kind of scaling solution, but with the caveat, like you said, that this eCash stuff doesn't necessarily need an on-chain upgrade, so it might be feasible even in that scenario. But what about ZK rollups and BitVM? You mentioned that very briefly. We've been hearing some noise from the community. Eric Wall, is big on this, and various other people, as that also being a potential, layer 2 scaling. What do you think about that compared to either Lightning Network and or eCash? What are the prospects there?
So ZK rollups are sort of the extreme end of the Covenant scaling pots, because they allow for pretty arbitrary rules for the participants of the rollup. Like it can be an EVM rollup or whatever else that people come up with, like the smart contracting capability also blows up. The stuff you can do in these is in no way restricted by the Bitcoin script VM. The problem there is that if you want to have like absolute certainty about its soundness, then you have to store the rollup data on chain. So you don't just put the Susan proofs on chain to span from one state to another. You also have to store the rollup data. Now the good news is that this rollup data seems to be pretty compressible. So you can get some scaling out of it because people have figured out various ways to compress the transaction data down to a lot less bytes than they would be in a Bitcoin transaction form. And you only have to present these bytes on the blockchain in block space, along with a Susan proof that proves that if that data block with this hash in the block is in the block, then for those transaction updates, this particular transaction is valid. And everyone can validate that without knowing anything about those rules, because it's a ZK verification, right? So you are proving out that the data actually gives you the update that resulted in this withdrawal or something. This is how you can imagine. So it has scaling limitations, because if you do not do the data availability thing on chain, then someone can just update the state and then nobody knows how to continue. Because if you do not have the rollup data, you do not actually are able to construct the next block, so to speak, for the rollup, the next state. So someone can just take the funds hostage if you do not have the data availability guaranteed on the blockchain. And if you do put the data availability stuff, the rollup data on the blockchain, then it just creates even less space for other people to transact. It just makes Bitcoin's scalability kind of like worse. And the worst version of this thing is where people just put the rollup data on chain and there is no ZK verifier opcode and no Covenant opcode for the escrow. So you are basically just parasitically using Bitcoin for data availability layer instead of using a big block chain or something else, right?
Yes.
You are using Bitcoin because that is super replicated and that's nice. And the funds are still secured somehow differently. But that's kind of the sovereign rollup thing that people are trying to push on Bitcoin. I think it's kind of like the worst. That's an anti-scaling feature, if you ask me. But you can't really stop it. Let's face it. If anyone wants to pay for block space, then they can put that bullshit on the blocks. That's pretty much like a conclusion of this recent ordinal inscription filter debate. It seems like the miners are front-running this whole thing, and they are opening up private means of submitting transactions directly to their mempools. So even if you could somehow magically take control of the mempool relay system, like Sybil every node that wants to relay everything and employ filters, which is not really possible. And that a bit ties back to the whole zero-comp debate, if you remember back. Like people
Yes.
thought that the mempool is not consensus layer,
Yes.
only like 10 to 15% of the nodes, if they implement RBF, then you are going to have an RBF network. And the rest of the people can run, first seed rules, that it won't matter. And so the point is that we are having this, I won't say war because it's not really a war, because it was concluded basically after the first shots were fired that the people who want to filter are not going to win this. I think that's pretty much like a fact now. So basically you have this weird situation where people can put any bullshit data so they can pay for block space. So it again strengthens our beliefs, some of our beliefs, that the block space needs to be expensive enough so that it is used for financially meaningful and efficient transactions, and not just random JPEGs or like people using it as a cloud backup or whatever, And and so that this thing ties back. The sovereign rollups also want to use the block space for something else, and it's a questionable value. Proper zero-knowledge proofs and rollups would actually probably help the scalability of Bitcoin and possibly the privacy, but it seems like that the first thing everyone wants to put on Bitcoin for whatever reason that I cannot fathom is EVM. Like whenever it's sidechain or whatever, someone has the bright idea to just bring all the cluster to Bitcoin, because why not? And that's like, it seems to be like the great underlying desire of the entire crypto ecosystem to put EVM to Bitcoin. And yeah, and so that's why I don't think we will have a ZK verifier, like a generic ZK verifier of code, because then you absolutely cannot control what people do with it, and then you get EVM rollups and all that decentralized exchange thing with the front running and sandwiching and then so that's what I think about the zero-knowledge proof, and BitVM is trying to do something where they actually want to implement a ZK verifier in a different cryptoeconomic security way, where you actually have someone that stakes a lot of Bitcoin, and they basically create a circuit for a ZK verifier, and you can slash them if they ever submit a bad proof. And that's how they want to bypass this. The Bitcoin community, Bitcoin developers are reluctant to actually fork in a ZK verifier of code, but BitVM already works. And if you can implement a ZK verifier in BitVM, then it kind of gets closer to having ZK rollups. I wouldn't say it's the same thing. Like challenge response fraud proof games are not the same thing as actually something enforced with consensus code. It's not the same thing. And you always have this thing about is the stake sufficiently large enough to secure the economic activity on a rollup or whatever, right?
Yes.
Is the MEV not 5 times larger than the stake? And so it's not the same. But the desire again exists and is very strong, and people are working on it to do this stuff. Because frankly, BitVM is too inefficient and too expensive to do much other than create bridges with. Like generally, you have to move thousands or tens of thousands of Bitcoins for it to be worth to be carried out on chain, and it just won't work for games of tic-tac-toe that people play with each other. Like that is not going to be probably the future of Bitcoin, as far as we know.
Okay, yeah. So it sounds like you kind of generally agree with me that maybe this is a bit of a dead end and opening up a whole new slew of problems. Speaking of big block Bitcoin, the biggest news of this week that everybody has been talking about, Judge Mellor in the Craig Wright versus COPA case shocked everyone, and yesterday or the day before made a sudden ruling during the closing arguments instead of everybody was expecting kind of April to be when we got some updates, but instead Judge Mellor said, I'm going to produce a full ruling, but in the meantime, the evidence is overwhelming, so I just have to clear this up. Craig Wright is not the white paper author, the Bitcoin white paper author, not Satoshi, didn't create the Bitcoin software and didn't create Bitcoin. So we're waiting to see on a full judgment, especially to see if Craig is going to end up going to jail or anything like that. But we just have a quick clip from Craig a couple of years ago that touches on his thoughts on this subject. So let's just hear that now.
So I'm going to court on this. That simple. I don't need to face trolls in rooms. That's why we have evidence. So here's the thing. Evidence. We have courts. You know what happens when you lie in a court? You know the maximum penalty in this country for perjury? It's about 20 years. Great. I'm going to be in court. Prove it in court. You get to send me to jail for 20 years. I get to put my evidence and other people get to put theirs. That's how real things work in the real world. Outside of this crypto shit sort of Twitter storm world where people sit there going, oh, Twitter matters. The real world, people have evidence and rules. People put documents out and get a chance to actually have them analyzed properly. People in the real world, outside Twitter, Facebook, and fake news, get to actually say, I'm sorry, I didn't create that. Just because someone wrote my name on a PDF didn't mean it came from me. And I'm not throwing Western culture away. I'm not throwing law away. I will do it in court where I will be held liable for my actions. Thank you.
Something wrong now, I long for yesterday.
So there we have it. Craig will be being held liable for his actions very soon. We've seen... Hopefully, yeah, we've been seeing a variety of reactions as a result of this. You've had a large section of the BSV community coping and saying, no, finding a new excuse. We never needed Craig, or the courts were wrong, or we haven't heard the full judgment, or what have you. You have some people saying, coming to grips with it and saying, look, we bet everything on this court case. We were wrong. Some people interested in maybe switching to BCH or BTC. There's been a few of that. You had Calvin, of course, a linchpin player in the whole thing, make a sudden announcement. He posted on Twitter, "Goodbye, everyone. This is my last post before I take off on an adventure I have been planning for the last year. I have now handed this account over to a team that will work with the BSV Blockchain Association, London Blockchain Conference, and other organizations dedicated to educating on how enterprise blockchain brings together and completes AI, Internet of Things, Web3, and other areas of big data. I'm proud of what I've done to save such an amazing piece of technology and look forward to watching it continue to grow," end quote. So he has now fleeing the scene and trying to wash his hands of the entire disaster. So we've had a mix of views, and obviously jubilation from generally the rest of crypto that I was glad to see Craig get wrecked and stop suing everyone. Moonsettler, what did you make of this entire state of affairs?
So the nastiest loop is when they try to pretend that we are now suddenly like statist cards that celebrate the legal system. Like, that's not exactly what we have been saying. We have been saying that it's not for a court of law to decide what Bitcoin is and who Satoshi is. That's complete bullshit. But like, a lying fraud that is trying to financially ruin people by this vexatious litigation and trying to use his sugar daddy's money for that because he's a broke fuck. So a person like that getting wrecked in court and going to prison is actually something that we can celebrate, and that is a completely separate issue from the fate of Bitcoin or any of that bollocks that they imagine. because let's face it, that was never a question that we would just change our mind on Bitcoin or submit to their idiocy if somehow magically like Craig would have won this case. But the thing is, for me, it was not as cathartic because I was keeping an eye on what was going on, and it was pretty obvious for weeks that he's going to lose and badly. Like really, the only question was that is he going to jail or he gets away with it somehow. And I think it's very much in the cards that he goes to jail now, but maybe that's wishful thinking. I don't know.
I think it's probably likely, fairly likely. I'd say rising probability. I'm hoping for that. One thing I want to also throw in there that I don't think you'll hear this take from anyone else is that a lot of people on the BTC side especially were kind of celebrating like, that's it, BSV is done, it's finished, Craig and Calvin are out, the whole thing's imploding, like it's going to be over. That's not the case at all. That's not what's going to happen.
No, I did not expect that to happen. I mean, Bitcoiners are kind of similar. Even I have noticed this talking to BSVers a lot and talking to Bcash people, Bitcoin Cash people. Like Bitcoiners share a lot more than what they differ on. And they are stubborn bunch, and I saw zero chance of anyone like changing their mind on their thesis, the underlying thesis, just because of a court trial. Like that had zero chance in hell in my mind. Like I said, this whole thing is more about can you abuse the court system and not go to jail like this, and can you just blatantly lie, like and submit hundreds and thousands of forgeries. Can you do that and get away with it? That was what this was about for me, and it was not unexpected that people did not give up on their thesis, and they would rather eject Craig and even Calvin, who has been basically like funding that whole crap show as far as I'm concerned. So they would rather they were talking about stuff like re-implementing BSV before they changed the license to basically a closed source control license, re-implementing the protocol, the specification, like forking it and making it open source again. So they are at the point where they actually want to do some development work to continue on with this stuff. And I don't really understand why and what they see in that clusterfuck of an idea of putting everything on a blockchain. But it did not surprise me that it went this way. Like I actually expected this, and again, if a judge ruled that Craig Wright is Satoshi and BSV is Bitcoin, I mean, I see about zero chance of any Bitcoiners like giving up on their node implementation. What could have happened is that the Bitcoin core repo would have to be moved off from GitHub because Microstone's GitHub, they might actually side with the curtain, and we would have to migrate to a more decentralized, more peer-to-peer means of keeping the core repository and doing the development, and that would have sucked because GitHub offers a lot of tools and automation and stuff like that. On the other hand, it probably would have not been bad for Bitcoin long term. And again, I absolutely see no way that they could have just magically taken over everything, like how they imagined in their narratives. That absolutely made no sense to me. But BSV's capitulating also makes no sense to me. Like obviously, like I said, Bitcoiners are what they are. Like they are going to be stubborn, and they are just going to keep on doing the same shit.
Yeah, and so I really want to just hit on that. You know that for the BCH community, I think any BSVers, and there are a few that have kind of said, okay, that's the end of the final straw for me, and some of them are interested in coming to BCH. We should obviously in general be welcoming to them, and they're welcome to join the community and kind of start again with a bit of a clean slate. But obviously, you can forgive but don't forget, right? Like generally people need to earn their way back in and show that they've dropped a lot of those false narratives. A lot of people had been somewhat on the fence or in both communities. I think that's completely fine. For the BSV community that remains, I think we're going to see a really interesting period of crypto history again here, because it's somewhat like BCH after Amori was removed, and a lot of people think, okay, that was kind of the end of it, but really it's actually a chance for fresh leadership and ideas and so forth in the community. I think there's actually it will take probably years, because at least anybody like Joshua Hensley or Jack Liu, like there's a few guys that if they can get something going and they are seeing things fairly clearly, like they can admit the court case was lost, Craig is not Satoshi, etc. If they can kick out a lot of the cultists, then there's still a lot of technical and other issues in what they're trying to do, but they're going to have a stab at it. So I think it's worth keeping an eye on that. I think it would be much better for them to just join BCH, but they're going to try.
Yeah, that's another thing I predicted, by the way, that just because there is a ruling, of course, a lot of people are going to keep saying that Craig is Satoshi. Like that was so evident to me, that when people said that this has a lot hanging on this decision, I didn't understand where they are coming from. Like I knew for a fact that this would change. Again, nothing except for Craig, and maybe for the developers and a few other people he is harassing in courts. But basically, the overall way people think is never going to be changed by a court ruling. And really, these protocols are just people. Like people agreeing on things. You can't just change their minds like that. That's not how it works. So yeah, I'm not surprised that they are trying. I'm not sure if they will be able to succeed. Like without someone bankrolling it, that infrastructure that is required for these Terra nodes crap and whatever that they are trying to do, and the development. I'm not sure it will not fall apart. And if it falls apart, I'm finding it very likely that those who are extreme big blockers, especially now that Bitcoin Cash, goes towards the direction of this Obla update, I think.
Yes.
That is basically an adaptive block size and an unbound block limit in time, although it's always bound at a certain point in time. So when they realized that because that narrative was that BCH is just 32 megabyte, they also abandoned the pod that Satoshi laid out, and I heard a lot of the talk. And when they realized that this is actually going into the unlimited blocks direction over time, then they might actually think, okay, that's more my speed, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping. And I guess, like the community has to be very careful with people reintegrating back into the community. But there's a lot of passionate Bitcoiners there. And if some of them can drop a few of the, things that they believed, then...
A lot of scammers too.
What was that?
A lot of scammers too. They have a lot of...
Well, that's that too, right? So it's going to be the key point to try and integrate the useful parts while, keeping the rest out. And certainly a lot of, like you say, I don't know if we're going to wait and see what exactly happens. There's not all that many nodes. Exactly how many is up for debate. But according to Blockchain, there's only 4 BSV nodes. And if Calvin has control of a couple of those and he just switches them off, it's possible the whole network just stops and that's just the end of it. But like you say, if they're going to suddenly try and run that infrastructure themselves, it's possible they can do it. But I
don't think you can sync up a BSV node with the open software available. Like people tried just out of academic curiosity. They actually put the iron under the node, and they failed. It turns out there were some shenanigans, and that code does not actually sync up, as far as I know. I mean, I could be updated, but as far as I know, that openly available software does not sync up to the chain tick. And so people can just start running BSV nodes and start doing their own decentralized consensus thing, go back to the roots. They can't actually do that. The license does not permit that, and it's just not possible, it looks like, technically. So it's a funny situation. Yeah.
Well, do you think if you had to bet in 12 months, will a BSV chain still be running? Yes or no?
I think probably. I can see that there will be people who are predominantly probably interested in scamming people. I'm sorry to say that, but that's my take on that. They are going to keep the show going somehow. Calvin is probably going to bankroll at least the node infrastructure of N-Chain for a while. And, that's my guess. That nothing, I assume nothing would really get changed by this cut order. Again, aside from the unfortunate people who have been harassed legally by Craig Wright and for him personally, aside from that, I don't think anything much gets changed.
Yeah, Jet, what's your thoughts on this entire situation?
I didn't realize their node count was that low.
It might be higher. Like they have a couple of different services, but it is like single digits probably.
Yeah. And then what exchanges still support them?
I don't know of any. I'm sure there must be at least one, but
So in 12 months, I suspect there will be like one dedicated guy who's like very like permanently online, always on Twitter being like, no, BSV's still alive. You connect to my node here. Here's all this. It'll be one guy supporting all of the infrastructure just because of an autistic obsession. It won't be... I don't think it'll be used economically. I don't think people... Well, I mean, debatable if that's the case now. But I don't think Kurt will be running Gorilla Pool anymore. I don't think the CoinGeek will continue to be doing their magazine reports or any... It'll be 99% dead.
Yeah, well, we're going to see exactly how little of the sort of chain is left over once Calvin... siphons out the rest of the money and just stops pouring in cash, just accepts the loss, basically, right?
Yeah, and this whole thing, the reason why I thought it would be cathartic somewhat when this happens, and it wasn't really, like I said, it was telegraphed from a long way ago that it's not going crazy, but the boss from 2018, like he was so arrogant and dismissive and the boss he made, how everyone will be ruined who opposes his vision, right? And their ideas about how the hash wars will go, and they have been blown the fuck out 2 times on that, and kinda, I feel like it's payback time. But we did not get the payback yet, because frankly, the people who have been most hurt by this, aside from Craig's narcissistic injury, right? People who have been most hurt by this are not the people who necessarily did these things. They are not the people who necessarily perpetuated these toxic trolling things. They just bought into this bullshit for whatever reason. And you hear these quotes about how BSV will make it possible for AI to be integrated in blockchain and get the data from a blockchain. And I just want to scream, like, why? Why would you do that? Why? It literally makes no sense. But again, some people just think that this is a good idea. They internalize this and handle it as like a universal truth or whatever. And if they go to BCH, then they will probably try to push the same thing. So that can be interesting, because you might actually see the blockchain, start bloating with various idiotic things like putting game data on chain and this weird NFT obsession that they seem to be having. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Well, we've got some breaking live news. We can just watch this, I guess, live on the show and react. But it seems under an hour ago, while this show's been live, Ryan X Charles, famous for picking the BSV side in the BCH BSV split, has posted a 2.5-minute video titled "Craig Wright is a Scammer." So let's just watch this live and see what he says.
So some people have asked for my opinion on what just happened with Craig Wright in court. So I think Craig Wright is a scammer. I think what happened is for years and years and years, he led people on suggesting that he had evidence that he's Satoshi Nakamoto. And as Craig said, and as many of us agreed with, the correct place to reveal that evidence is in court, not on the internet. So it did make sense that Craig doesn't show that evidence to random internet trolls on Twitter or X. But what happened is he goes to court and he presents absolutely nothing. So where's the evidence that you're Satoshi? I mean, you told everyone that you're Satoshi for years. And meanwhile, people based their careers and lives on this idea that we acted for years in a way that trusted that Craig's assertion that he has actual evidence that he's Satoshi Nakamoto would bear out in court. So he just led everyone on. It's like a giant bluff, like you're playing poker and you pretend to have a hand that you don't have. Craig just did a giant bluff. He bluffed being Satoshi Nakamoto. He acted with a tremendous amount of confidence. There were lots of reasons to think that he was Satoshi Nakamoto. And I want to make a complex assertion that I know that some people will troll me for saying. But I think the possibility, there's two different claims, whether Craig is Satoshi and whether Craig is a scammer. Forget about whether he's Satoshi. He's definitely a scammer because he bluffed. He basically, which is a type of lying. And he didn't just lie to, some person or group of people. He lied to everyone publicly over and over and over again, including all of his friends, all of his family, everyone who supported him in business. So he's a scammer because he implied that he has evidence that he's Satoshi Nakamoto, which we now know he does not have. So if he hadn't implied that, many, many, many people would have made very different decisions for a very long time. So he scammed everyone. So, what else is there to say? The guy is a scammer. Time to move on.
Yeah.
All right. Well, hasn't made it all the way out of the COPE, it seems like. He's got a lot of the way there, like I was scammed, basically. He's got to that point. He's got I got lied to a bunch, and despite I'm sort of missing where is like everyone told me.
Yeah, you can take it two ways. You can take it two ways because what he said technically is that he is definitely a scammer because he made everyone believe he has evidence that he's Satoshi. Right? So that this guy, I kind of thought that he's at one side super smart. He obviously understands cryptography, probably way beyond my understanding and stuff like that. And
don't sell yourself short.
And he's like, I always thought he's smart about this thing, but on the other hand, he said things that make people call him, very, very nasty names. And a lot of people are saying that he's an idiot. I don't think he's an idiot, but there is something going on there where he may not be over his religious experience, or basically God taught him that Craig is Satoshi and is the second coming or something like that. I don't want to make fun of that, but it sounds like he's not fully over that part. But yeah.
Well, yeah, I'm hearing Craig was a scammer and he told everyone he'd deliver in court and then he didn't. And there was no sort of acknowledgement of that's what everybody told me. There was a lot of when you do that apology where you just say in general terms, objectively, Craig is a scam. What about that? Like, he scammed me and I got wrecked, and that was a bad idea. And everybody basically told me that I shouldn't have, listened to that. And they were all right, and I was wrong, and I fucked up, and it was on me. That's kind of what you need to be. Also, trying to sort of dodge the question of, is Craig Satoshi? No, but he's still trying to sort of talk around that and like leave the door open that there's 0.001% possibility that he is, right? I don't know. Jet, what do you think?
The biggest thing that actually irritated me, and you already kind of pointed this out, is there's definitely still some cognitive dissonance. It wasn't that he implied that he has evidence he's Satoshi. He said, I have evidence and I am Satoshi. There was no implication. Like, and it's nice to see that he's coherent now, but for the longest time, Ryan completely went off the deep end. So maybe healing has begun.
Well, yeah, I think this is definitely a step in the right direction, and it's going to be the case for a lot of people that have been caught up in this entire thing, that they're going to have to reevaluate and take stock. And it's a hard thing to do, to his credit, not to, shit on him or anything like that too much, but to his credit to actually make a video like this and come out and at least publicly be kind of in a roundabout sort of way saying, I was sort of wrong, and
But it was very similar to Gavin's way of doing it, right? Gavin Anderson's way of doing it, where he said that he was bamboozled by Craig, and he did not outright say that this guy is a liar and a fraud and he's not Satoshi. Instead, he said that he might not have been proven, but he thought it was proven to him because that proving session was a sham. That's kind of what he said, and it's not even in such strong words, right? He just kind of hinted at that is how he sees things now, and he did not actually denounce Craig.
Yeah, you've really got a spread of opinions. Cheap Lightning in the chat says, yep, good on him for taking a small L, undoubtedly with quite a good amount of sarcasm in there. Maybe I'm a little more forgiving than the average person. We've also got a slide here which is about Hodler and Kurt discussing this after the verdict came out, and obviously the two of them had a long history of over the years sort of sparring about this on Twitter, and it seems maybe somewhat even in person. So Kurt posted saying, when Hodlnaut's team appeared to have won, I congratulated his attorneys in person and offered a handshake to Hodlnaut in the lobby. He refused. In victory, we will see the hearts and demeanors of Jack and the small blockers, who I also congratulate today. And then Hodlnaut replied, I don't shake hands with scum. I know you like to pretend you're not scum, and you're successful in fooling quite a few people with it, but we both know what's real. You've been lying through your teeth and enabling this evil for many years to the very end, hiding behind a facade of a good Christian. Absolutely despicable, GFY, end quote. So, I mean, I don't have the most sympathy for Kurt in this position to, once again, to sort of try and double down or evade the issue a little bit, instead being like, well, we lost, but I tried to be a good guy and I tried to shake his hand. It's like, this is after years and years and years of lies and fucking up his life.
Hostility, yeah. Like, it was outright hostility. I don't care who says what. That was pretty obvious, and pretending that it was just fair play is bullshit.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like the community generally agrees with that. 942 likes for Hodlnaut and 131 for Kurt, so that's a pretty strong ratio. But like for we can see here the different people that are all in the BSV lies. They have a variety of sort of strategies in terms of how do you just, like, the best thing to do, honestly, my advice to anybody involved is to just say, look, I was completely wrong and I got scammed and I should have realized and I fucked up and I'm gonna, have to take the long road back, which not coincidentally, Joshua Hensley actually did. He nailed it. He has a half-hour video where he talks about it. He says, I'd figured this out a couple months ago, but I couldn't say because I was under I would get legally sued and all that. And we got to just reconsider things. He's keeping up his old videos where he explained how he thought Craig was Satoshi and saying, look, people can see my journey. And that was just the most mature, honest, forthright thing. And I commend him very, very highly for that. And for anybody else who's in a similar situation, take a look at that, because that's kind of how it's done, I would say.
You know what was the most ridiculous thing to me lately about this whole story is how they left up the idea that Craig Wright is autistic. Craig Wright is a narcissistic sociopath and a compulsive liar. He seduces people. He is very good at. We have a history of people, men and women, who have been seduced by Craig to the point where he could very easily manipulate them. And he is not an autistic person by any means. Of course, everyone is on the spectrum, but he is as close to something else than what people call an autist as possible. That's a very, very different thing that he suffers from. And it was so weird that the people just left it out and ran with it. And even the courts enabled him in this bullshit. That was to me weird, and I don't know if funny or pathetic, but yeah.
Yeah, well, I guess we're going to be seeing the fallout for a while longer, and I mean, yeah, quite a few people are going to have to are going to double down and make things worse for themselves. Some will, there's firstly, they have to realize that they were wrong, and then secondly, they have to admit it, and those are two different phases, right? So anyway, I guess we'll see as more of this kind of unravels, but it's certainly an interesting time in crypto history, and I think my hope is just that Craig goes to jail and it stops all these lawsuits against the devs. That's the main thing that just has to stop. And it seems like this is probably going to be the end, thankfully, of that.
By the way, I actually saw mellowing out. I mean, of course, Kurt is a special case, and a few others will probably never be forgiven for how they participated in this. But the chief propagandists and people who actually did the smear campaigns, with half made up bullshit, half complete bullshit and stuff like that. Those people will hopefully never be accepted back to any decent group or community. But I have seen that the talks between Bitcoiners and BSPers mellowed out. Like after it was all said and done, people could just talk about the actual differences, between the philosophies and how they see the world and stuff like that, and have a civil discussion, like actually be civil to each other, and that was interesting. I would not have bet on that happening personally, but it was not bad.
Jet's cracking up over here. What, you're not vibing with that, Jet?
No, that I find that really surprising too, because it to me is like BTC folk giving credibility to the idea that the problem with BSV is Craig. He is a problem in BSV, but he is not the problem. It's weird that they'd be
several problems.
Yeah,
no, I don't see that way. I think it's more like once you get out of that mindset of that you are in a battle, right? You are actually, lines are drawn and you are on opposing sides. You probably interact with others differently. Like you are not in the trenches anymore. I think that's just what happened. I don't think we are giving credibility. A few people said weird things on Spaces. Like a few people actually acknowledge that there might be something worth researching over there in the BSV ecosystem. I don't think that makes much sense to me, like technically speaking, but of course I'm also biased pretty much towards Rollups, so it's a different different background and way of thinking. So, but I generally just think people stopped perceiving themselves being in the trenches.
But even that seems weird to me.
I don't think it's that weird. I think in some cases there will be a long tail of coming to realization. But if I've been following fairly closely, like a lot of the Twitter spaces around the COPA trial were already heavily in this vein. Like there was people reporting from the actual court who were on the BSV side and the BTC side, and they would, maybe be chatting in person a bit, or at least, be aware of each other and sort of be tolerant. And then people would be chatting online who are on one side or the other, and people were able to have an actually pretty decent dialogue of like, we're all Bitcoiners and, we all kind of want to see this situation resolved. And that did become somewhat unifying. So I'm not super surprised that this is how it's winding out. And a lot of people who are not the main antagonists, I think, will be able to do a fairly good job of whether they want to continue with BSV in whatever form that is, or whether they show a bit more interest in other BTC, BTC or BCH or any other coin that they get excited about or whatever. As long as they weren't, big on the record causing a lot of the grief, then I think they can just say, look, that was something that I was a bit mistaken about in various ways, and, I've learned from it, kind of thing.
Can I ask you guys about something now that we are discussing?
Yeah, go ahead.
What do you guys think about Nexa? I mean, I just heard about it very recently. I did not keep much tabs on that, but how is that generally perceived in the Bitcoin Cash community?
About what?
Nexa.
Oh, okay. How is Nexa? So for people who don't know, BCH in its long history of internal community divisions had, I think it was after XCC left, right? So that would be the end of 2020, but before Smart BCH became a thing, which would be middle of 2022. Let me think, end of 2020, or maybe even just throughout 2021. Anyway, somewhere in there, essentially the Bitcoin Unlimited team, who for a long time, maybe even going back to when, there was only one Bitcoin community, pre-2017, had some of their own ideas about how some things should be done. They essentially decided to start their own blockchain. Now, it wasn't a fork, it was a code-based fork, but not a blockchain fork of BCH, as I understand it, right? So they didn't split, with Satoshi's coins and, everyone getting an airdrop.
Not a UTXO fork, right?
Not a UTXO fork, just a code fork. So they took the foundation, the actual tech of BCH, and then they had some certain changes that they wanted to make. Now, I'm not across what all of the changes were. The biggest thing that I think was in dispute was that they wanted to do this thing called op group, or like group tokens or something, which was essentially their proposal that cash tokens is now on BCH. Like op group got kind of surpassed in favor of cash tokens by the BCH community, but they either thought that cash tokens was never coming because it was still a couple of years away from getting consensus and getting implemented, or they just thought their idea was better and they started this alternative chain, which they called Nexa. Now that has been running as a separate chain now for a couple of years, with their own, funding and resources and so forth. Now, from my point of view, I think it's okay that anybody can go and start their own fork and they can do whatever they like. And certainly I've met, at least in passing, a couple of the Bitcoin Unlimited guys, but there was a couple of really key issues with the whole incident from my point of view. The first was there was a lot of contention over the money in Bitcoin Unlimited, because they had received donations, again, before the fork even, and they had then sat on that BTC and made, huge price gains. So for a long time, they'd been criticized by the BCH community as, why don't you sell your BTC and put it into BCH? in order to align your incentives with the community. Why are you keeping this other foot in the other camp? Of course, that was financially a better decision, but it still led to them being conflicted. And this sort of seemed to be amplified once they were like, well, we're going to start our own coin. That's like more of the same thing. If you're getting airdrops in that coin, they're still trying to be aligned with. They're still trying to message that we're aligned with BCH and so forth. And I don't think they obviously couldn't get their ideas to get consensus in the BCH community. And so they thought, well, we'll do it our own way, which is fine. But I was never convinced that it was all that much of a greater idea sort of to begin with. And one more thing, hang on, I just got to add one more thing on this. The other problem that there was, as far as I'm aware, is they also, besides starting their own chain, which was kind of, by the by a little bit, although it was a bit dodgy that they were using these funds that were donated for BCH development to start their own project, was that they said that they wanted to do this chain as a kind of test net for BCH, and that they would implement their thing on it. And if they proved their idea, then it would be like backported onto BCH. But that was always nonsense. And everybody knew that, because if that was like, we already have a test net, you could use that. Yeah. And if you wanted to do your own chain, it was obvious, like as soon as you've started your own chain, it will just diverge further and further over time from BCH. And whoever is invested in the tokens of Nexa is going to have a completely different interest to invested in BCH. So the messaging was like, has been a big part of the issue there, where if they'd just been upfront and A, got the money from somewhere else to do it, and B, not tried to sell it as this weird like test net to put in their rejected proposal, that would have been fine. But that's kind of as I understand it.
I think testnets and CNETs serve very different purpose, and some things you cannot actually test out in them properly because the coins have no value. Like you cannot test out economic games properly. You can test technical stuff. I think the Bitcoin testnet is basically the best way to test out your mining setup, basically, and stuff like that, and the stuff where you need the mempool propagation rules as close to mainnet as you can get, and Signet is more suited for technical testing of new opcodes and new applications and improvements and stuff like that. And it's not related to proof of work and not related to anything with proof of work. Yeah. And some things probably can be tested out on these. Some things can only be tested out with proper economic incentives where people can take money from you if you screw up or the contract is bad. So I'm kind of in the opinion, but it sounds like that Nexa did not actually split the Bitcoin Cash community. Like they just went off and they did not take a lot of following with them. It also kind of surprises me. I thought they were pretty hardcore Bitcoiners, the Unlimited crew, and it surprises me that they actually did like an altcoin, or some people say just another shitcoin instead of working on Bitcoin.
They do still maintain a node and so forth, and they've been keeping that in consensus. So they're in kind of a weird state where they are keeping, one foot in the pond, but also kind of trying to do their own thing. And we'll see how that plays out. Again, I have no malice towards them for doing a a different chain or whatever, except to the extent that I think it was maybe a bit dodgy that they used those BCH denominated funds that should have been for BCH development on a different project. And again, they tried to sell it with these kind of fake narratives. Jet, what do you think of all this? You might also have a different take.
So I don't really care about the coin that much. I was interested in them bringing improvements, if they discovered any, to Bitcoin Cash. That hasn't ever been realized. The most interesting thing about the whole thing to me, and this is maybe even a little bit of history for you, Jeremy, was that Paul, their marketing guy, was one of the main organizers to the Bitcoin Cashers group, which sponsored meetups for years. And then He was supposed to host a hackathon that never went through, and then Nexa launched, and he ended up being the marketing guy for that. And then, like, I think a month ago, maybe even less, he put out essentially like a statement that's like, I'm not with Nexa anymore, deleted all the tweets, that was that. So, and he's working on another project now. So it's interesting that I got to learn of a new grifter in the space. I think I trusted Paul a lot more before any of this shit happened.
Well, I'm not the biggest fan because I've met him because he ran that Coin Riot was going to be the Smart BCH hackathon that he was going to run, and I was going to be, involved in helping to organize that because I was in the UK. But then, it all sort of fell apart, and that, in the end, it was like no harm, no foul. But it certainly didn't make me see, him as necessarily being a reliable operator. And then also before that, I had been to a crypto meetup that he had run in London where I met him, and I wasn't super impressed about that because it was just a generic crypto meetup and whatever, but I went along and I wanted to pay for my beer in crypto. They didn't accept Bitcoin Cash, they didn't accept any crypto at all, and there was just a weird assortment of like people trying to shill referral links to like various StackSat type of services, and like it was just a bit of a weird mix, so
I think I've always just given him the benefit of the doubt because my kind of introduction into the community of Bitcoin Cash was through that Discord, and then I became a moderator and an ambassador, and he helped pay for some of my meetups, I assume. I was never really in contact with him, but so I've always given him a benefit of the doubt. Like, things just didn't quite line up, but with this, it's like, oh, okay, he wants more fiat. He's looking to take a paycheck.
Yeah, I had the same feeling about the entire BSC thing, to be honest. I had the feeling that some people just wanted to be early on Bitcoin. A lot of altcoins are born out of the desire to be early on Bitcoin because you missed it when it was $10 or $100, right? And the BSC felt more like us plus like some significant mass of people are considered, not just a few hundred hardcore funds who actually want to put all the internet on the blockchain. Like, there are people like that, but I think there is not many. I think most just wanted to ride that huge upside if there is an upheaval, and they lost interest over the years and just left. So it seems to me that the Bitcoin communities are kind of consolidating right now. So it seems like that it's only Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash that's the shape it starts to take. Because I also don't perceive, but I'm pretty clueless about the whole Amaury exact thing, that it doesn't seem like that split the community either, right? Can you tell me about
it? It did, but the thing was, it was only like a very small sort of splinter group as far as I know. Now, that was still quite chaotic because they had such a prominent position at the time with maintaining, the main node. So then you have to, obviously have different devs and like, some people are obviously on one side or the other. It's the same as we're seeing now with the Craig Wright stuff. Like, once it comes to that kind of thing, people pick a side, then some people get called out for you were wrong, and there's bad feelings and people fall out. And so it is very damaging, in general.
And they have like an active community going on, or it's just some BC funded.
No, they do. They have their own community, such as it is. I don't know that it's very large, and they started at an 8% tax, and they've raised it to 32% tax. So they might eventually just raise it. Like, it's just a government at that point. They're just raising taxes until they have destroyed the entire economy, and there's not going to be anything left, right? But Amaury has also been more active on Twitter lately, so I'm wondering if we'll see some more. He hasn't been commenting on BCH though in quite a while, to my knowledge, except a couple of salty things like this isn't working or it all sucks, even though it's better than ever. But yeah.
So I guess it looks to me that there is some consolidation going on, and it's interesting because for a lot of years people thought that it will be endless splintering, right? So people are just going to keep on forking, and communities are just going to keep on forking because disagreements can grow to pretty bitter levels. Like right now, it's happening in Bitcoin because because, like I said, the ossifiers who are claiming they only want some money, and they don't care if we have like a banking scaling future. They just want some money. They just want the end of the central banks, and the ability to debase people through printing money. And we have people still who think that self-custody is very important and should be preserved. And maybe it's not as important for micropayments. We are starting to make the concessions that, okay, maybe you don't want to buy ice cream and coffee on the blockchain, but come on, at least like your savings, like hold the keys to your savings, hold the keys to your credit card balance amount, your monthly spending amount. Like, can we do that? Like, can we do that with better trust assumptions than full-blown custody? So this is kind of like the split that is happening. We had this unfortunate thing. I'm not sure if you guys followed that. The ordinals inscriptions thing brought in a lot of people from PSV who wrote this thing and have been saying things, probably purposefully trolling with certain things that are factually not true, but at least properly trigger the Bitcoin maximalists, especially the more conservatism. And so you have this situation where they somehow got it in their head that Taproot, the latest update to Bitcoin, was somehow responsible for this, which is complete bollocks, by the way. So ordinals is just autistically counting thoughts. It was always possible from day one. If someone decided to do that, it was always possible. The op-false, op-if, something, op-and-if thing was always possible in Bitcoin script. It's not some new exploit. It's not some unintended consequence of Taproot. That was always possible in script. And when people designed Taproot, the people who actually participated in, they made the decision to not limit the size of the test script besides what is limited by the block on purpose. Like, they thought that this will be interesting and useful. So these ideas are just getting out of hand. That people who bring these up in opposition to changes, like they are stating things that are factually not true, and it's spreading, and it's gaining quite an echo chamber effect, especially among the laser eyes or parts of the laser eye community, and you start to hear weird things where it sounds a lot like the current that is going out in the world. Like it is reflected in the Bitcoin community that now people want to tell other people what to do with their own money. They want to tell what kind of transactions they are allowed to do, right? And this is scary to me, because I kind of think that the biggest problem in the world right now is that people who are very influenceable by the media industry and the government propaganda, basically, are trying to employ this coercive violent structure that is the government to stop others from doing what they want to do, even though it does not impact their lives directly, and they just don't approve, and they want to perpetuate this thieving that the government does to then oppress you and repress you and take away your freedom. And it smells like the same thing is trying to happen in Bitcoin. And weirdly, they don't see it this way. They think that they are just in trying to protect Bitcoin. That's what they think. We must protect Bitcoin. And it sounds very much like this this whole conservative idea of, you have to stop everything that you disapprove of, and then you will be safe, maybe, or I don't know what to make of it, but it sounds like an echo of what is going outside in the world. And I see how this takes away freedom and privacy from people. Year after year, we have these horrible policies, right? These horrible oppressive, privacy-invasive policies just push. And even when something is repaired, a few years later, it's living in some emergency or salad bill or whatever, And it feels like the same thing is happening in Bitcoin frankly, and that is annoying to me. And it is actually possible that this will lead to a split. I don't know how or what will be the boiling point, because they obviously lost this filtering thing. To me, it's obvious that they lost this, that ship has sailed. But they are now trying to shift to stop any change, any development to Bitcoin, because the slogan is any change can introduce something that we did not think of before. And so
unknown unknowns. Unseen consequences, blah blah blah, just like inscriptions, etc. So on this topic, actually, look, Jet, let's bring up this clip here. It's perfect. We had this episode came out this week of what Bitcoin did with Samson Mao talking to Peter McCormack. Now, I said the second that it came out, basically, this is the Ministry of Truth broadcast from Blockstream. So there's the whole episode is absolutely great, where the starts off right with nobody should really be holding non-custodial UTXOs. That ship has now completely sailed, exactly as the big block has predicted. Liquid is now being pushed to the front as the solution, which of course Blockstream profits on, exactly as the big block has said. There's a lot about a 1 million price prediction to, of course, distract the plebs and the hodlers with a nice shiny price target. Simplicity is the approved narrative that Blockstream are blessing for development. And there was also right at the end some more chat about a potential next Bitcoin civil war. So that story is being brought into front and center by the Minister of Propaganda here. So let's hear what they had to say at the end. Peter and Samson are talking about Michael Saylor, and then things kind of carry on from there.
Top 10, maybe higher, maybe top 3. I don't know. He could certainly outpace. There'll be a price of Bitcoin where he is richer than, say, Elon Musk.
Yeah.
And so what's his incentive? Is his incentive for him, or is the incentive that he thinks is right for everyone?
That's the question we'll find out.
Yeah. So,
but the point is, we should, as Bitcoiners, be cautious to elevate people so far up, because I don't know, one of the lessons from the block size war was you shouldn't do that, because you call this guy Bitcoin Jesus. Now the media is calling him Bitcoin Jesus, and it's Bitcoin Jesus says you need bigger blocks, and this is not the real Bitcoin. So it's a double-edged sword. Like, he can promote Bitcoin massively to the mainstream media, but if he's on the wrong side when those lines are drawn, that's going to hurt.
And how do we know what the wrong side is?
We'll know when we get
Roger there. And the rats he Piper to think he was on the right side.
Oh, they still think they're on the right side. But I mean, the market decides, right?
Yeah.
And that's the thing about the war. Like you said, as a new, fresh Bitcoiner coming in, you didn't know which was which.
Yeah. It was hard.
There is going to be a right and a wrong. So we'll find out what the battle is and what the sides are. But I'm hopeful I'll be on the right side.
And you think potentially that could lead to another fork?
I mean, there's always a chance for a fork. If there was no chance for forks, then Bitcoin would not be open and permissionless. But the market will decide. But it's going to be an awkward transition. Like, you remember back in those days when we weren't sure. Well, I was sure, but a lot of people weren't sure. Is it going to be the big block fork or the small block fork?
Well, the futures helped with that.
Yeah, the Bitfinex market. But it was not a time at which people were absolutely certain. A lot of people pinged me after the block size war and said, thanks for maintaining your stance. And they felt that it was some sort of assurance that things were going to go right. And they did, fortunately. But it's not like we knew. A lot of people didn't know it was going to turn out the way it did.
I don't think anyone coming in now and they'll hear about the block size wars will be able to fully comprehend how big a deal it was and what happened.
It was scary for a lot of people.
Eric Lombroso, I had a long conversation with him and he told me some scary stuff. I always think John Carvalho never got the credit he deserved, because I remember when I was looking at it, I was going through all the emails on the mailing list, and these changes were coming. These changes to the code were coming, and John just held this firm line in it. He was just rejecting all of it. And I really don't think he's ever got the credit he deserves for holding his line. You're holding a finger up.
I've heard things, and I talked to some people at Madeira at the conference at Atlantis, and they're saying that Carvalho is disillusioned with Lightning now, and he's leaning towards big blocks were right.
Well, so he said that to me. So I don't think he thinks big blocks were right, but he is certainly, he did show me, he questioned the Lightning, and he did say like the irony is that Roger was right, but I don't think he's actually saying Roger was right in terms of we should have bigger blocks. I think what he's saying is we should be doing more research into increasing the block space, the block weight. Sorry, like more work can be done. Like we got 4 megabytes through a segment, right? Block weight. I'm completely out of my depth, but I think that's what he's saying.
I don't think we should mess with the parameters.
Okay.
We increased the block weight as a result of implementing SegWit.
Yeah.
But we should have kept it the same.
Okay.
To be equivalent to 1 megabyte.
Okay.
Because you remember when we had the crash, that put a lot of miners out of business. Core Scientific suffered massively. And this was because there was not enough pressure to keep fees high enough to let the miners earn enough.
Right. Okay.
So if we didn't mess with what Satoshi had, it would have been better actually. And if you look at the scale we need to onboard 8 billion people, 1 megabyte, 4 megabyte, it does not really make a functional difference.
Yeah, because in the end, you will adapt to that market.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is block weight and block size essentially the same thing? It's just one's achieved without hard fork.
Yeah.
It's doing the same thing.
But I don't think the path is to find a way to increase the weight or anything.
Okay.
We should not mess with the parameters of Bitcoin. Okay. Whether it was by design or by accident, it doesn't matter. Satoshi got it right. And one of the takeaways I took from the block size war was we should have respected the original parameters a bit more.
Okay.
Because it would have been better. Like we would have had a smaller effective block and the fees would have been more balanced. It would not have been so low during that time.
We would have dealt with this problem sooner.
Yeah. But the way I think that we fix it permanently is we implement simplicity. So everyone that's fighting for a specific opcode, you're fighting for opcode design space hell, basically. Like every single thing needs a new fight. Just fight for simplicity and get that in once, and then we can have everything we want. And it future-proofs Bitcoin.
I think even like with John going down that rabbit hole, because he's building a business, right? He's trying to understand it. I feel like I can still say like I respect the hard line he took during.
Yeah, but the next block size war.
And everyone else did.
The next block size war, it could be him on the other side.
Could be. Well,
I don't know.
Depends what we're fighting over. It would be scary times. I would appreciate the previous block size war a bit more now, because I would feel like there's like two things I have to think about. I have to think about impact on my net wealth and future generations, and also what do I do about it? Who do I give? Because like I got criticized for giving voice to the other side. Don't talk to Roger. Don't hear them out. I felt like I should. And in hindsight, I understand why people felt that.
Well, when we first spoke, it was definitely a red flag that, is this guy a big blocker? Because I looked on your website and before me, it was like Wright, Roger Ver and a couple other guys. I'm like, should I talk to this guy? I don't know.
I mean, look, I spoke to them all and, learn some from it. But like, who would be the people you should?
Like, this is just, you can see the amount of like gaslighting that is going on here is absolutely insane. We've gone from originally SegWit was just a quick fix, not even a block size increase, etc. Just a quick fix to get us through to Lightning Network. Then it's since then been rebranded into it was a 4 megabyte increase. We've been hearing that the last year or two, as we've called out many times on this show. Now Samson is switching it back completely around. We shouldn't have made any increase, and the increase was a mistake to begin with, and he's there. John Carvalho's already being branded as a traitor, so he's obviously going to get shoved off the ship at the next available opportunity. Simplicity is going to be the fix. No other fixes are allowed except the one that Blockstream has blessed.
What is he asking for there?
That's a food gun, by the way.
Yes, he likes telling Bitcoin users, lower your expectations. We're not introducing all this complexity. If you want that, figure something else out. Is that what he's saying?
Yeah, he's basically saying tough shit. Like we can scale Bitcoin on chain, so you are going to get banned anyhow. Good luck with that if you are cool. That's what he's saying, and he's also saying that. And this is again such a disingenuous bullshit, because he's saying that instead of trying to figure out constructive ways to improve on the Bitcoin script VM, by adding things that are carefully thought through and are carefully evaluated to be fit for purpose and be generally safe, instead of trying to do that dance, instead just keep the door open and add simplicity. Simplicity, I don't know if you guys are familiar with that. It's basically a different scripting system. I think it has 9 basic instructions. Like it's kind of like a very primitive CPU with 9 instructions only. But these 9 instructions do not allow for doing complete computation. They allow for general computation of all kinds. You can implement SHA-256 in them. You can implement checksum in them. You can implement pretty much everything that you can do in Bitcoin. The interesting issue with that is that stuff that is really controversial in the Bitcoin community for various reasons, like tribe chains, are actually very simple logics. You just count over a hash to a certain number and then enforce that hash as a Zcash-like thing on the transaction. That's all you do to create a hash rate escrow. Miners can drive it back and forth with the hash rate as they create the blocks, and they are basically vote with their hash power on a big wall, and that's hash rate escrow. And that's a very simple logic. And we know that Opcat, basically, if it was introduced to Bitcoin, which is Andrew Polstra from Blockstream is a big fan of, and a lot of people are a big fan of Opcat. It allows for creation of such simple state-carrying smart contracts in itself with objects and a few other opcodes. And OpSHA-256. Like if we did not have OpSHA-256, we would have a lot of trouble with doing anything meaningful with this. But these are there already, and so they are basically arguing for just kicking the door open to a lot of things that can introduce MEV, like minor acceptable value at the scales that would probably like tail what is going on Ethereum. If it happened on Bitcoin, it has this ethos of being more decentralized and more, secure than Ethereum. So there is a higher motivation to put this crap on top of Bitcoin. Possibly tens or hundreds of times larger games could be played, and what that would do with minor decentralization. Because basically keep the door open on the total blocks is that miners need to perhaps validate to extract maximum amount of Y. Right? So it can create a situation where it's not a mandatory block size increase. It's just that if you want to extract 90% of the extractable value, then you have to actually participate in this protocol. So you have to partner with someone, maybe a central entity that does the math searching, right? And you get the block templates from them, and everyone gets the block templates from them. And that's like a huge possible centralizing and incentive ordering force on Bitcoin. And that is why basically drive chains are controversial. That is why open ways of doing side chains are controversial in the Bitcoin community. And that is why a lot of people are saying that even though Liquid is kind of like this custodial shitcoin, but at least it does not do that. Like it keeps all the fees from the miners, so it does not influence their behavior and their incentives. And some people say that's horrible, like that's bullshit, the miners should get the fees. And these people are just parasites and they should fuck off. And others are saying, no, the miners can't enter this game because they cannot control the consequences of that, and it can go very badly. So this is like a big philosophical debate, and what he's saying here is completely ignoring all that, are saying let's do simplicity, which is an everything update. Basically, like you are replacing the Bitcoin script with something that can do everything that Ethereum can, just in a non-Turing complete way, basically. And also implying that this somehow frees us from the opcode hell, which is kind of funny and bullshit, because you have to think of simplicity as basically a new instruction set, like the the x86 instructions, like, it's a new CPU instruction set, and you still have to implement optimized jets. They call them jets instead of opcodes. You have to implement optimized jets where you can just really optimize it to the machines that run the Bitcoin software, and things like SHA-256 are not going to be implemented every time in simplicity. They're just going to be called. And so basically he's lying about removing the opcode help, because you still have opcodes in simplicity. You just have a different basis for them. You can analyze them better. That's true. You can actually, like, if you want to go academic and ham on this whole thing, you can analyze the possible behavior and the costs and stuff like that better, more simplicity basis. That's the good thing about that project. The bad thing about it is, like I said, depending on how you implement it, either you are stuck in the opcode just the same, and it's going to be a very political thing, what jets to enable and optimize and alter the cost of it for it to be economic, right? There's exactly the same discussion as introducing opcodes to Bitcoin right now, almost.
The specifics don't really matter, right? What really matters here is the fact that Samson is clearly he's stoking the fires of war. Like you were talking before about, are we going to see a civil war? Well, if you watch this segment carefully, in the original, we didn't go like right from the start of the segment, but Samson brings this up himself. He says, "Hey, can I say one more thing?" And his one more thing is, I think we might be about to have another Bitcoin civil war. It's the predictive programming is starting here.
We all have this feeling, I think, like we who participate in the public discussion about where Bitcoin should go, like how it should change. Those people all have this brewing war feeling.
Yes, I know that, and Peter has talked about it before, and I know that you and many others, maybe are the same, are feeling like it. But if Samson is coming from Blockstream to tell you there's going to be a Bitcoin civil war, that means they're cooking it up, basically, right? And it's.
I mean, I think a lot of people overestimate what Blockstream is and how important part of Bitcoin Blockstream is. On the other hand, they are very good at psyops, and they are very good at running propaganda and inciting the mob against things. So they are very good at rabble rousing. They don't actually are an important, significant part of the Bitcoin ecosystem, as far as I can tell. Like economically, they basically burned a lot of investor funds. Produce nothing.
Well, they don't need to produce anything. They just need to stall Bitcoin. The banks will fund them forever to just stall Bitcoin.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that. And what I see, they are basically just burning money. They don't have any product that actually makes them a significant amount of money. And the thing is that it's such a stark contrast when these people are flooding proposals like CTB with that we should be careful with what we introduce to Bitcoin after 6 years or whatever, we should really, really think about it, like it's fucking silly. And then he says, oh, by the way, let's just keep the door open so we don't have to bother with any of that. Let's make everything possible. Let's introduce automated market makers and all the Ethereum high bullshit and novel two-way peg bridges and whatever, So they are talking out of their ass when they are doing this. When one group was saying cat is just a lines of code and it's so simple and so safe, he's completely ignoring the real elephant in the room, where the conversation is about. And that's the interesting thing about these Blockstream guys. There are like 5 or 6 of them, I don't know, that are constantly doing this double talk, That on one hand, we need to be careful when it's something that not one of them are pushing or made up or came out with. On the other hand, they are shilling things that just absolutely blow the lid off on what is possible and the possible outcomes. And the fallout for Bitcoin can be very traumatic for some of these proposals. So I don't know how people don't see this thing, but I have proposed jokingly that we should rename simplicity to duplicity.
War is peace, mate. That's what it is. All you need to do is get the population accepting two contradictory truths at once. Like SegWit, what did the Emergent Reason say here? We can't have complexity, but SegWit was a good thing. Like you just gotta. It's more just we can't have any changes. We should ossify. We shouldn't fuck with the parameters. Satoshi got it right, but also add simplicity because that's what we want to add. Like,
by the way, what I wanted to say is that there is. I see about zero chance. Like if we were, let's say, be serious about simplicity and started pushing it, I see zero chance that it can gain consensus in the current political climate.
I don't know. I would bet on simplicity over CTV, but
no, man. Like the number of people who would start absolutely screaming.
Doesn't matter. They've already been prepped. That's the evil bad guys. You already heard it. John Carvalho, he's already being prepared for when he complains about the whatever introduction. It will be John Carvalho is one of the Bcash bad guys. We already discussed it on what Bitcoin did. Trust me, the next people will get labeled ahead of time too. You're going to be on the shit list. Don't worry about that.
John did mention a few times that maybe we should just increase the block size and keep it simple, the keep it simple, stupid principle. Like, I don't add exponential complexity to a problem that might not need it. And a lot of people, of course, are going to be sympathetic with that. But on the other hand, you also hear lately the voices for reducing the block size. And again,
yes,
there seems to be like a talking to both direction again. So making sure that nobody can progress, all you have to do is if you not sure if you are familiar with this CIA.
Yeah, just create so many different options that everything's gridlocked, right?
CIA field manual for sabotage. So all you have to do is make sure that the conversation never ends. Like when consensus is forming around one particular set of trade-offs or solution or something, you just throw in a new one. So when it seems like the city is going to gain consensus, then the Blockstream boys throw in eCash, which is supposed to be better, of course. But since it does so much more and so much more complex, it requires many, many years of careful research and evaluation. So it's not like you can just activate eCash, no. And it's of course going to be more controversial than the city, but they are pushing it very hard. It's only up to the point where it comes close to actually gaining consensus. Because if you look at Adam Beck, speed talking, drive chains and stuff like that, and then basically
that's out. That's off the menu right now.
Then he stabbed Paul Stewart in the back basically by telling everyone that looks like people are realizing that liquid is actually like better and giggling about it. That was such a typical moment of the Blockstream duplicity, that they are doing this kind of stuff and they are really good at it. I mean, I have to tell you that they are surprisingly good at it. The plebs are licking it up, but I still think there is a limit to it. Like if actually a push comes to shove and the proposal gets on the table that really just enables everything like simplicity or CAT, and they are getting behind it and not just double talking and backing out the last minute, because that's a different story. If Adam is actually like pushing it or something. That would not end well for them, I think, in the current climate. Like, I don't see them coming out of that, but they are very good at maneuvering, and they would find a way to appear impartial and not the ones behind this whole thing. And just create controversy and make sure that nothing actually happens. I think that's the game they are playing. That's the feel I get. Of course, this is a tinfoil hat conspiracy theory or whatever. A lot of people would disagree with that because they hold these people in high esteem. I don't anymore. But definitely there is a pattern, like a repeated pattern emerging and becoming very clear. And even to people who told me that no, Adam Beck is not actually like a Machiavellian manipulator or whatever, just Bitcoin grandpa and whatever, just likes to argue everything today. And even people like that lost it basically and told me he's full of shit lately. So it is becoming apparent. The masks are coming off, I believe. But
that's good to hear. That is very good to hear. Been long enough, and I cannot wait for John Carvalho's version of the Ryan X Charles video that we just watched. That is going to be an absolute banger. Can't wait for the I was wrong hostage video. Going to be amazing.
By the way, John blocked me for simply telling him that CTV is just SHA-256. It's not that complicated, because he seemed to have claimed that everything can break Bitcoin and introduce hidden inflation and stuff like that. And I tried to explain to him that, changes in the script VM don't really affect that part of the code, And I did a bit of, a trollish way, because dude, it's just SHA-256. It's not that complicated. And he blocked me. He became such a snowflake, even though he was like a total troll. When he basically unraveled Roger there on that video. That's why he still set up. I mean, that was kind of probably the only contribution he made to Bitcoin, to be honest, that I know of. And he seemed to have become a big blocker and a snowflake recently, so that was funny. He basically undid himself.
Bad combo. All right, let's go to message to the community. You know the drill. As the guest on the show, you get a chance to tell the Bitcoin Cash community what do they need to hear to sort of round out the show. What's it going to be after all the various discussions we've had?
I think I can only say, keep going. Like, I'm really impressed with a lot of changes that were made to the Bitcoin Cash script VM. I'm impressed with the engineering effort, the thoughtfulness. It has this feeling, this press skills in Bitcoin development feeling, when ideas stood on their own merit and were discussed on their own merit, and it was less like political maneuvering and the usual human politics bullshit. That's what it. Of course, I'm not an insider. I'm not particularly savvy and did not follow basically what happened in your development. But it appears to me that it has this press-schism culture of actually looking at changes and what they do, and not just be ideologically opposed, or most people really just support or oppose us in Bitcoin based on who makes them. That's very much like contemporary politics that people call democracy, but of course it's total like clown show, and it's not really. It's like a uniparty system with two masks, and the deep state is just laughing its ass off because you are voting for clowns for living in different colors, but it's kind of like has this bullshit feeling when it comes to different development. So in short, I think try to make as much headway while you can, because if your consensus grows bigger, you probably lose this advantage.
Definitely, absolutely. Okay, we get our supporter appreciation. Thank you to the donators. Thank you to our patrons, Ricky HP and Digital Checo. Thank you to our sponsor, General Protocols. Check out bchbull.com. Both the Celine and BCH podcast number 4 Flipstarter got funded. So huge shout out to everybody who contributed to those. That's amazing. And it's going to keep those projects rolling along. So special thanks to Majamalu Marcelo, Shadow of Harbinger, Molecular, BTC Fork, Adam Back, Big V, Chiefy, Chief Lightning, Emergent Reasons, Imaginary Username, Yeah Beer, and Brian Kanachi. You can hit up bitcoincashpodcast.com for the start guide, FAQ, and links. If you're new to the show, check out episode 85 to get the basis of what all of this is going on. Check out Celine Wallet at celine.cash and come to Bliss at www.bliss.cash. Shout outs for the show. You're first up, Moonsettler.
All right, thank you guys very much. Bitcoin Cash Shoutouts is one guy who I have been talking a lot with, and he has been showing me how wrong I was in my perception that Bitcoin Cash is like that and nothing happens there. And I don't remember the name of the other great guy, Matthew. Maybe?
Matthew Hirkins, yes.
Yeah. He's also like a great guy. We had nice talks. And sadly, I don't seem to grasp via the space about cash tokens. I try to understand what is it really about, and I think I kind of have but it does not really fall into my head as readily as the Bitcoin stuff that I'm dealing with, day to day. I still feel it. I only have a vague grasp of what is this about, and a lot of the right now presented use cases, like, they don't seem very convincing to me, but I now understand that it actually has like super cool long-term ambitions that are for going to further than the NFT stuff or whatever is happening on the surface. So that was great that these guys actually talk to me and explain stuff to me.
Yeah, it'll click with you. It's one of those things. You just got to sit for a while, and also, like I say, time will also demonstrate. Because right now, things start with the most basic, easy things that everybody jumps on, and then it escalates in sort of significance from there. Jet, do you have any shout outs?
Yeah, so my shout out is to the BCH Toronto guys. They actually have a flip starter going on right now. It expires in, I think, 7 days. I think they have 3 BCH left to go, and this is to help fund a year's worth of meetups. It's partially run by the same guy that does Coins for Close. I saw him in the chat earlier, so shout out to you and your efforts. Hope that we get funded.
Where can they get that link at?
bchtoronto.com.
Okay, bchtoronto.com. All right, and my shout out goes to David Shattuck and everybody who played in the A Fifth of Gaming tournament last night. It was really cool. We had the biggest tournament ever. 33 people didn't actually play because a few people fell through, but myself included, unfortunately. But we still had a really good bracket. It was really good, really very competitive, I think, towards the end. And the A Fifth of Gaming is just going from strength to strength with a lot of hard work behind the scenes from the team there. So everyone involved in that, B-Chat as well for doing the stream. It's going great. So just keep up the good work there, everyone.
They're both in the chat too. Nice to see you guys here.
Nice to see you guys. 24/7. That's it. Up late last night. Bitcoin Cash. Day after Bitcoin Cash. Eat, sleep, Bitcoin Cash, repeat. All right. Thank you very much, everyone, for listening. Until next time.
Thank you, guys. Bye.
So I started realizing that if you can just find strength just a little bit longer, you will have a crew of people following you along the way.
And that is another thing that no one can ever teach you. Because you're going to have to learn that on your own. You're going to have to figure out how to pull that energy out of your mind on your own. There's no book you can read that all of a sudden I have